Good morning, everyone. My name is Councillor Stephen Holiday. I'm the chair of the Audit Committee. We have quorum. Now calling meeting number 8 to order. Welcome, everyone. Today's meeting is being held by video conference and in person at City Hall in Committee Room 1. The meeting is also being live streamed online at youtube.com/Toronto City Council Live. Although we may be meeting in different locations today, the Audit Committee would like to acknowledge the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Although there are no speakers currently registered, if you do register to speak at today's meeting, please listen for me to call your name. I will call the speakers in the order they appear on the list. The list of speakers can be viewed online by visiting the Audit Committee at the Audit Committee meeting at toronto.ca/council and clicking the speakers box for today's meeting. Members, the clerk has provided all agenda materials on toronto.ca/council and on the CMP, the clerk's meeting portal. Clerk's IT staff are available to members if you need help with your devices. I also want to remind you to please submit and approve your motions by email. Staff are available at Audit Committee, so the AUDITCTE at toronto.ca to help with motions. Are there any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? If you do have an interest, please raise your hand or unmute your mic and indicate the item number and the nature of your interest. Seeing none, we will proceed. But before we do that, I wanted to recognize a birthday, Councillor Francis Nunziata, and I want to wish you all the best on your birthday.
And Councillor Holiday, it's also your son's birthday.
Yes, it is.
Yes.
A special day. May I have a motion to confirm the minutes from our meeting on October 15th, 2024? Excuse me, December 15th? December 19th. Sorry, the ears. It's December 9th, 2024. Any volunteers for a motion? I'll move that. All those in favor? Any opposed? That carries. Members, we have 8 items on our agenda. Let's review the agenda, starting with AU 8.1, which is the Auditor General's 2024 Annual Report demonstrating the value of the Auditor General's office. I'll hold that because we have a presentation from the Auditor. AU 8.2 is the Auditor General's 2024 Annual Report and the Fraud and Waste Hotline. I will hold that as well because we have a presentation from the Auditor. AU 8.3, Audit of Toronto Shelter and Support Services, Warming Centres, and Winter Respite Sites, understanding and addressing the demand while improved financial accountability to stretch dollars further. We have a presentation, so I'll hold that item. AU 8.4, Audit of Parks Branch, Operations Phase 2, supporting vibrant parks by improving park asset management and repair processes. We have a presentation as well, so I'll hold that. AU 8.5, securing online confidential committee and board meetings, sharing best practices at the city and its agencies and corporations. Are there any questions of staff on that item or members wishing to speak or hold the item?
No, I'll move the recommendation.
Seeing none, Councillor Nunziata moves the recommendations. All those in favor? Any opposed? That carries. AU 8.6 is City of Toronto's Modular Housing Initiative, the need to balance fast delivery with stronger management of contracts and costs. Management status update on recommendations. Okay. Are there any questions? Members wishing to speak? Councillor Fletcher holds item 8.6. AU 8.7, City of Toronto Audit Planning Report for the year ended December 31st, 2024. Mr. Clerk, just confirming we do have a presentation on that from the external auditors. Okay, so I'll hold that. And AU 8.8 is ARENA's 2023 Audited Financial Statements and Status of Outstanding 2023 Audited Financial Statements. Any questions or holds? Councillor Fletcher is holding AU 8.8. That's the completion of our list, so we'll go back up to the top. AU 8.1, Auditor General's 2024 Annual Audit Report demonstrating the value of the Auditor General's office. I believe there are there is one presentation from the Auditor, so we will just take a moment to get things arranged and be right back.
Okay, we're ready to get started.
Welcome, Madam Auditor General and your team. Please go ahead as soon as you're ready.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, Chair, councillors, staff, and members of the public. I'm very proud and honored to present the excellent work and value of my office to you today. This presentation is on our 2024 annual report, which demonstrates the value our office brings. In this presentation, I'll provide some highlights from 2024 and walk through 3 of the key areas of our performance: adding value to the city, making a positive difference, and showing leadership. Then I'll wrap up with my final remarks. In 2024, my office issued 10 reports, 9 performance audit reports, and 1 investigation report. Our work was focused on the key program and service areas as shown on this slide. Altogether, these reports contained a total of 86 public or confidential recommendations. We also issued a consolidated report on our follow-up work and a standalone follow-up report to the TTC. Every year, we demonstrate the value our office brings with a quantified return on investment, and for every dollar invested in the Auditor General's office, there was a return of about $11. With regards to the important work of our forensic unit, in terms of the fraud and waste hotline and investigations, we have a separate annual report and a short presentation on it following this one. The first area I'll speak about are the financial benefits of our work that add value to the city, which includes money that the city has saved as a result of implementing our recommendations. Many of our audit recommendations result in financial benefits for the city once implemented. We've referred to these financial benefits as savings in our annual report, and they can include both operating and capital and the following types: cost reductions, future cost avoidance, new or increased revenue streams, and efficiency improvements. Every year, we quantify savings and the return on investment of our office, and the Audit Committee has always recognized the importance of this. Our annual report explains how we determine the savings estimates and our conservative approach, which starts on page 31 of our report. So the city achieved a total cumulative estimated savings of over $376 million over the last 5 years of annual reports, that's 2020 to 2024, by implementing our recommendations. This slide demonstrates how the $376 million in savings is a cumulative amount of one-time and annually recurring amounts projected over a 5-year period for each of our past 5 annual reports. It is normal for these amounts to fluctuate from year to year, as it will depend on the timing of when management implements the recommendations and the value of the cost savings for those recommendations. In this year's annual report, we have recognized that the city realized over $21 million in one-time and annually recurring savings for 2024, projected over a 5-year period. And we'll break this down further on the next slide. And when compared to the cumulative cost of operating the Auditor General's office over the last 5 years of $33.3 million, this means for every dollar invested in our office, there was a return of about $11. On this slide, we have Table 2 found on page 35 of our report, which shows the reports where the city realized savings in 2024. There are 7 areas where there were cost savings realized in 2024, and this is the result of both management taking action in implementing our report recommendations, as well as the follow-up work of our staff. So thank you to both city management and our staff for their hard work. Following this table in our annual report, we've included write-ups for each item to explain each of the savings from these reports. And you'll note the codes in the column on the far right-hand side of the table, together with the legend at the bottom, explain the type of financial benefit realized. You may have noted that for this year's realized savings we've reported, there are none reflected in the 2025 budget notes of city divisions or agencies. However, they are appropriately not reflected, as they are either avoided costs, one-time recoveries made in 2024, or corporate-wide savings, and we do work together with the Financial Planning Division in terms of these savings. This is an example of cost avoidance savings from our 2018 audit of urban forestry on permit issuance and tree bylaw enforcement. So to address our audit recommendations, management developed a comprehensive process and policy to address old unclaimed deposits. And since April 2022, staff have proactively conducted periodic reviews of old unclaimed deposits, resulting in deposits being refunded to the city if tree planting requirements have been satisfied, or there is a transfer of forfeited deposits to revenue. And as a result, there were just over $5 million in one-time savings in 2024. From our review of the city's 2025 budget notes, we did note additional potential future cost savings to be realized soon. We will review and verify these as part of our ongoing follow-up of recommendations and consider these for our next annual report. For example, TTC fare evasion and the recovery of revenue through an investment in fare compliance. So the TTC estimates that its investment in fare compliance will generate $12 million in gross recovered fare revenue in 2025, with a net of $4.5 million after offsetting $7.5 million in program costs. Technology Services has reflected just over $2 million in efficiency savings from better management of technology vendors and licenses, and Fleet Services has noted savings from better management of underutilized fleet vehicles and the related avoided maintenance costs. But our audits are not just about the money. Our work aims to help the city and its agencies and corporations to improve internal controls, make policies and procedures clearer, improve efficiency and effectiveness of the city's programs, systems, and processes, and ultimately achieve better outcomes on important issues that affect Torontonians' daily lives. This is the area where our audits can have an impact on the city's services and people. So in 2024, our office delivered impactful audit and cybersecurity reports with recommendations that included non-financial benefits, such as those aimed at supporting timely ambulance emergency response for people with medical issues requiring urgent attention, supporting beautiful, clean, and safe parks, and achieving service level standards reliably and consistently across all city parks, enhancing the city's ability to safeguard long-term rental housing by improving the overall effectiveness and efficiency of the short-term rental program, helping improve public safety in constructed buildings through efficient and effective intake and plan review of building permit applications, reinforcing the importance of management's leadership and commitment to ensuring openness, fairness, and transparency in city procurement, and strengthening cybersecurity controls at city agencies and corporations, including the TCHC, TSHC, and Toronto Hydro. And city staff are implementing our recommendations to maximize the benefit to both the city and to the public. In our annual report following each of our report abstracts, we highlight in purple boxes, as shown on this slide, management's actions taken since that report was published and prior to us starting our follow-up work. Our audits shine a light on issues and provide recommendations, but management are the ones that implement the recommendations so that the change happens. I'd like to thank city management and staff, including those from the city's agencies and corporations, for their cooperation, input, and assistance on these audits, and their willingness and hard work in making progress on our report recommendations. And finally, I'll discuss how our office shows leadership. I'm often asked who audits the auditors, and our office undergoes an external peer review every 3 years. And for 2024, our office received the highest rating on our external peer review, an unqualified pass opinion, which is the 7th time our office has received this rating. The peer review team also provided comments to recognize areas where our office excels, including acknowledging how our system and working paper files are set up very well to mirror the standards, recognizing that we empower our staff through a good mix of both technical and soft skills training, as well as through our mentorship program, and providing feedback from their staff interviews that our staff enjoy their work and making a difference for the city, which the peer reviewers noted was a testament to the leadership of our office. We pride ourselves in being leaders in local government auditing and are regularly invited to share our expertise. In 2024, I was invited to speak at the Women in Leadership Conference in Toronto, and our staff presented at the annual conference of the Municipal Internal Auditors Association. We also participated this last year in the International Fellowship Program of the Canadian Audit and Accountability Foundation. Our office hosted 2 fellows in our office, one from Vietnam and one from South Korea, with our staff mentoring them. This was the first time a municipal Auditor General office has participated in this program, and it really was a win-win-win for our office, for the fellows and the performance audit knowledge they then bring back and apply in their host countries, and for our staff. Our office also takes pride in giving back to the community, and in addition to our regular participation in the city's United Way campaign, our office participated in the Colleagues Assisting in Providing Essentials, or CAPE, food and clothing donation drive. And of course, being auditors, we count everything. So during the month of November 2024, we collected a total of 501 donation items to support 61 beneficiaries, including 55 city-operated shelters across the city. So in summary, our office continues to demonstrate value. Number one, financially. Through management implementing our recommendations, the city realized total cumulative estimated savings in our most recent 5 annual reports of over $376 million, and we had a return on investment of $11. Number two, we're helping the city to make a positive difference across the city and in Torontonians' lives with significant and impactful recommendations that will help the city to achieve better outcomes for people. And number three, we're recognized as leaders in our profession. Of course, we could only achieve this through our amazing team. We have an incredible executive team and very hardworking, dedicated professional staff who work very long hours to complete these high-quality audits and investigations and produce these reports, as well as manage our hotline and conduct our follow-up work. We also have a very diverse team, and that further strengthens our office and the work that we do. So a big thank you to my team. Thank you to the Audit Committee and City Council for supporting this role and our office, and I am honored to lead our office and look forward to continuing to assist City Council in providing accountability for achieving value for money in city operations and making a positive difference together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Auditor. There are the questions of staff or the Auditor General. Councillor Fletcher. And
Councillor.
I'm sorry, and that's Councillor Crisanti. I'll recognize you second, but go ahead.
Yeah, no problem.
Councillor Fletcher.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to confirm that from 2024 and all the value, and thank you for your work, you and your team, and collecting all those things for the shelters, and counting how much you did, of course. But that the pay-it audit, I think that yesterday we approved funding to finish that, a deeper dive into that, right? Am I right about that? For 2025?
Through the chair, my understanding is our budget was approved, yes.
Okay. And then I'm just interested in the Airbnb and the parameters of that. It looks like it's for people that are complying and have made an application, and whether or not that's correct. I'm not sure that your scope, and I wasn't on this committee, the scope being what I'll call ghost hotels. Was that part of the scope of your work or not?
So through the chair, we identified areas for improvement for strengthening the controls and enforcing the short-term rental program. And so there are various ways that people who do not have legitimate Airbnbs, are trying to get around those controls.
And did you look into the system of, I mean, there are a couple of, they're condos, but they're actually hotels, Airbnb hotels on Dundas. Did you look at those venues that are very clearly full of Airbnb that were built for residential condos as part of the work in ensuring that when we're building housing, we're building it for people to live in, not for long-term, short-term rentals?
So through the chair, we did include some of those and did a survey in terms of the condo associations as well.
And how would we ask you to continue that work? Because this, to me, is very clear looking at those who are making application and making sure it's right, making sure everything matches. So if you say you're doing this, you're actually doing that. But what about that market that isn't making applications but is clearly operating Airbnb? What's the plan for that out of your report?
It might be better for management to answer that question. And so they are taking action on all of our recommendations.
Just give Mr. Grant a moment to get to a microphone. We do have
So
a
the
full.
Airbnb hotels on Dundas and Jarvis, they've been identified in this audit? And what steps do you take to, once you find that, to investigate? And what would the expectation of the auditor be to investigate and make changes there?
To the Speaker, we also sent a report in 2024 to Planning and Housing and to City Council to strengthen the bylaw. We worked in close conjunction with the Auditor General to find ways to strengthen the bylaw. We added 21 staff, and we are in the process of hiring them. And the purpose is both on the compliance side and the enforcement side to address the issues that you are raising.
Is there an investigation side? And how many? Is that Madam Auditor General, is that a recommendation that these anomalies, that the unit has an ability to investigate situations such as those ghost hotels?
So through the chair, there's a number of areas that can be tightened up further, and so I believe that is the work that management is undertaking to tighten those up.
Have they been identified clearly as to, and what the end result you're expecting for ghost hotels that have basically all visitors and no residents?
So to the Speaker, our intent is when we become aware of those buildings is to look into them deeply, both on-site and administratively through our compliance team. Again, so both of those have been strengthened so that we can address them. When we set up the program originally, it wasn't as thorough and as robust as needed to address the loopholes that landlords, property managers, residents have found. So again, working with the Auditor General's office, finding opportunities to strengthen that is what we've done through a number of bylaw amendments, as well as increasing our staff complement so that we can address those issues that you raised.
I don't know, Mr. Chair, if we would have to go in camera in order to discuss actual addresses. I'm unsure.
Councillor Fletcher, if it's your wish to get into the territory, I suppose we can.
I just don't know if we have to do that, or I can just do that in public. I'm unclear. Maybe legal should let us know.
The only thing I would advise is investigations of MLS starts to get out of the territory of the committee.
Well, I would
as important
expect
as they
that.
are.
I guess what I'm expecting is that, given these are so blatant, that would have been part of the Auditor General's work to understand what had been done at MLS to curb this.
Well, if it's the wish, we can hold it down. We can go in, we'll evaluate the questions as we go through them. I just don't want to get out of the bandwidth of the committee, but if that's what you suggest we need, Councillor Fletcher, we can do that.
Well, I don't know, the bandwidth of the committee is Airbnb. And so for me, this is a pretty big deal. And it's pretty clear what's happening. So I'm just not sure, since you're auditing the department, whether or not those steps have been taken and whether the Auditor General is aware or looked into that.
So let's hold it down. We'll hold it down and go into camera at the end. Did you have any other public questions?
No, that's it, thanks.
Okay. Councillor Crisanti, questions, please.
Yes, good morning, and thank you, Chair. So I think first it's in order to congratulate the Auditor General and your team for a phenomenal job that you've done, and you've done for many years. I've been, as you know, on this committee now for quite a while, and to hear that you continue to do this amazing work is very reassuring to Torontonians, to taxpayers. And so, so my question is, the outstanding recommendations, I believe that at the last meeting, you indicated that there was a backlog, and just checking in with you again on how that's moving along and if it's making some progress.
Thank you, and through the chair. So yes, progress is being made. We have our regular follow-up work that we conduct. So as at December 31st, 2024, there are 253 recommendations that management has reported as fully implemented or no longer applicable. And so we are doing follow-up work on those. Of the 253, 162 of them are currently being assessed in our 2025 follow-up cycle. There is good progress being made.
I'm sorry?
There is good progress being made.
No, that is good. But there's still 163 that is in progress and not yet completed.
Yeah, so there's actually 361 that are not fully implemented, so they're in progress.
What do you have an estimate as to what additional savings, once they're all implemented, we could realize from those 300 recommendations?
Yeah, so in terms of savings, it's difficult to estimate at this time until the savings are actually realized and we do the follow-up work to verify. However, what I can say is that in terms of any savings left on the table for in-progress ones, there are certain areas that are more likely to have savings than others. So TTC fare evasion would be one of them, and I understand that there is work that's being undertaken by the TTC in terms of our recommendations. It's just a matter of timing. We have not yet verified that work yet. Some of the other areas would include hotel shelters, interface invoice, interface billing, and those are the main ones at this time. Okay, on the TTC fare evasion that you just mentioned, I believe you said earlier that the net benefit would be somewhere in the $5 million range. They're investing $2.5 million to potentially save $12 million. How did you arrive at the 5? So through the chair, those are not our numbers. That is what TTC has estimated and included in its 2025 budget notes for the year 2025. For that 1 year. Are there outstanding recommendations for the fare evasion for the TTC that have yet to be implemented at this point? Through the chair, I'll need to get back to you on that. There are a number that are in progress still that the management has not assessed as fully implemented. And so we need to, so the ones that they're taking action on right now, they have not necessarily assessed as fully implemented. All right, could you undertake to get that information to me when you can? Mm-hmm. All right, thank you. So unclaimed deposits, this is the item that you mentioned with respect to forestry, I believe. So people submit deposits for tree protection or other reasons. And was that $5 million you indicated was unclaimed? Over what period of time? Do you have it? Since 2022? And what efforts were made to return that money to the people that submitted, the applicants?
Through the chair, the original audit that was completed in 2018 identified that urban forestry had a balance of $29 million in refundable tree security and guarantee deposits, and that had been collected between the period of 1994 and 2017. As a result of the audit, Parks, Forestry and Recreation started conducting a comprehensive review of those old and unclaimed deposits going as far back as 2008. So in the last 5 years, from 2020 to 2024, they have transferred over $5 million from the reserve into revenues by reviewing all of those old deposits. And there is still $23 million balance of deposits as of September 2024.
Wow, that's a pretty significant number. And so, but there is every effort being made to return this money to the applicants. Last question.
Yeah, so following the audit, and management can speak to this as well, but following the audit, management developed a comprehensive process and policy to address the old unclaimed deposits. And so according to the new policy, A deposit held for 5 years or more is considered aged, and they will review it. The deposit will be forfeited if efforts to contact the payee are unsuccessful after three attempts, or if it's determined that they're non-compliant or contravening their permitting terms. So there's a process to review all of those deposits.
All right, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Nunziata.
Thank you to the auditor on the work you do, but just a question to the CFO. When we went to the budget yesterday, you mentioned the amount that we have saved in efficiencies, correct? So what the Auditor General is doing as far as her presentation on savings, that was part of it?
To the speaker, so our city's financial planning division works very closely with the Auditor General. We identify all the savings that come through implementation of the various recommendations. Where that gets represented is where we would have incremental savings would be shown in our cost reduction table. They would be reflected in the overall savings that you see in the budget. As the AG noted, in the case of 2025, while there are many savings, some of them had already been built into the base budget, so we're not incremental in 2025. In other cases, they were cost avoidance. But on an annual basis, we would always capture that and reflect it in the total savings. Yeah,
I just want to make sure there was a connection there. Okay, thank you. That was my only question.
Thank you, Councillor. I have a quick one. This one is for the management team, actually. City Manager. I've been involved with this committee for some time now, and one of the things that I notice is recurring themes in the audits. Quite often, there's an audit finding around contract management, or there's a finding around the management of records, the management of data, the management of inventories. Sometimes it's about management oversight, but not all the time. There's other things that we learn. My question to the management team is that I understand that the department that receives the audit learns a lot from it, but how does the city management team then bridge those learnings to all of the other departments? Because quite often the themes are universal. And I wondered if you could offer comment to the committee about how that mechanism works.
Sure, and Chair, thanks for that question. A couple of things occur. You know, first off, on most of the major audits, the Auditor General and I have a chat as well on some of those themes. Where is this following on with things that we've seen before in the audit? So it gives me a sense of her perspective on it. And then the other piece is that our senior leadership team takes all of these and does exactly what you just said. It's less about the actual audit and more about what does this mean across the organization. As you have pointed out, there are some themes. And I'll give you an example. Some of the contract management, some of the financial elements that come out of the audits does drive us to look at who are the actual people that are responsible for this work. What does the job description for those folks look like? And should we be strengthening the financial requirements of some of the staff in some of these critical divisions and departments looking at some of that work? So that's how we take some of those items that come forward. Of course, we want to action the actual audit itself, but then we look at it from the standpoint of how can this help the entire city of Toronto to do better and hopefully in the future have fewer of these recurring themes happen. So that's the process we use.
Do the senior management team get circulated on the audit or the audit findings or a briefing note?
So Chair, once it's published, this is required reading for the senior leadership team to make through it. So they're not in advance as a group circulated on it, but that's fine. We look at it and then we add it to our agenda. As you can imagine, we meet a couple of times a week and we add it to the agenda and talk about these things so that we can also, as a group, try and peel off what are the things we need to all be looking at.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Okay, I'm going to hold that item and we will come back to it a little bit later in the meeting and go in camera. So there'll be a motion to do that. Okay, we're going to go on to item AU 8.2. There'll be an opportunity to speak after that. We're going to go back to AU 8.2, Auditor General's 2024 Annual Report on the Fraud and Waste Hotline. Madam Auditor General, I'll give your team a moment to change over. And please begin as soon as you're ready.
It's okay. When you're ready, yeah, can you launch it? You ready? Okay. Okay, so we'll get started. Thank you, Chair. This presentation is on our 2024 annual report on the Fraud and Waste Hotline, and I'm joined by Elaine Au, Assistant Auditor General, and Thusha Anandarajan, Senior Manager from our Forensic Unit. In 2024, we have continued to receive and process complaints submitted to the Fraud and Waste Hotline, and we also issued one major investigation report. It's important to note that we assess every single complaint that we receive. The work done by our team, both on the Fraud and Waste Hotline and the investigations, are important tools to help deter fraud and waste. Thank you to my team for their excellent work they've accomplished. Today's presentation will cover 3 areas. First, we'll provide some information about the Hotline program. Then we will look at key statistics and the impact of the Hotline. And finally, we will briefly discuss our plan moving forward in 2025. I'll now turn it over to Elaine Au to walk you through the first 2 areas.
Thank you, Auditor General, and good morning, members of Audit Committee. To begin, we would like to remind everyone that there are several ways to report wrongdoing to the Fraud and Waste Hotline. Complainants have the option to submit through our secure online form or by telephone, email, or mail. All reporting methods allow for complainants to remain anonymous if they choose to do so. And more information about the hotline can be found directly on our website. The hotline is governed by the Disclosure of Wrongdoing and Reprisal Protection Policy, which is part of the Toronto Public Service Bylaw. Under the bylaw, all employees have a duty to report wrongdoing, and employees who report wrongdoing in good faith are to be protected from reprisal, which is management's responsibility to ensure. In addition, the Auditor General is required to investigate any reprisal allegations. To determine whether a complaint falls within the scope of the hotline, we need to look at how wrongdoing is defined. Wrongdoing, as defined in the bylaw, refers to serious actions that are contrary to the public interest. In bold are some of the common complaints we received this year, including conflict of interest, subsidy and social assistance fraud, time theft, and other types of waste or mismanagement. Allegations that do not meet the definition of wrongdoing are generally considered misconduct and are referred to the appropriate city official or accountability officer to investigate and action. Now that you have a bit of background on the Hotline program, we would like to go over some key statistics on the next 2 slides. In 2024, we received 679 complaints, representing approximately 1,050 allegations. This is approximately 36% lower than 2023 and is primarily the result of receiving 78% fewer complaints that are outside of the hotline scope. It is important to note that despite the decrease in complaint volume, we continue to manage a high volume of allegations, which, as you can see in the dark purple bars on this slide, has remained relatively consistent over the last 5 years at approximately 1,250 allegations per year. Receiving fewer outside jurisdiction complaints allowed our team to focus on ones that directly impact the city and also allowed us to make significant progress in reducing the backlog of prior year cases. On this slide, we will discuss additional statistics which demonstrate some of the outcomes of the Hotline program. In 2024, 121 complaints were investigated by divisions or our office. Of the 121 complaints that were investigated, 26% were substantiated, and this percentage will increase as more complaints are concluded in 2025. And more than half of the substantiated complaints were anonymous. Discipline acts as a deterrent to wrongdoing, and from the substantiated complaints, a total of 9 employees were disciplined, up to and including termination of employment, and there were 23 cases of other appropriate action taken by management, including, for example, the termination of ineligible subsidies. In terms of values, actual loss for all cases closed and substantiated in 2024 was $740,000. with a total of $2 million over the last 5 years. These amounts are also expected to increase as outstanding complaints are closed in 2025. The actual loss represents the dollar value lost by the city as a result of substantiating fraud or other wrongdoing that was reported through the hotline. The rest of the key statistics are summarized in Exhibit 1 of our annual report. There are also many positive impacts of the hotline program, including information gathering, so collecting data to identify trends that may point to systemic issues or that may result in an audit being conducted. For example, the recent audits of the Toronto Buildings Inspection Function and winter maintenance contracts were initiated in part due to data from the hotline. Other benefits of the hotline include strengthening internal controls, improving operational efficiencies, and increased deterrence and detection of fraud. And throughout the year, we also conduct various investigative work. We may summarize investigations led by our office in either public reports, in management letters to division heads, or as a summary in our annual report. As noted at the bottom of the slide, in 2024, we issued one public report on reprisal allegations for reporting a conflict of interest, which is summarized in Exhibit 2 of our annual report. Several other investigations are also in progress, and we expect that some of these will be concluded and reported on in 2025. I will now turn it back to the Auditor General.
Thank you, Elaine. So looking ahead to 2025, our forensic team will continue to process complaints received through the Fraud and Waste Hotline, as well as conduct investigative work. We'll also continue working on communication initiatives to further promote the hotline and increase awareness on employees' responsibility to report wrongdoing to our office, and to continue to educate both city staff as well as members of the public on the types of complaints that we investigate. Through these communication initiatives, we will continue to inform, encourage, and remind members of the public and employees about the usefulness of the Fraud and Waste Hotline program. Next slide. So thank you to Elaine Au and our forensic team for their excellent work, and we'll now take any questions you may have.
Thank you, Madam Auditor. Are there any questions? Councillor Nunziata and folks, I have to squint to see the screen to my colleagues that are online, so just give me a moment.
On page 18 of your report, the conflict of interest was the second job on these two employees, on page 18. So how long was this going on that we had two employees working at the city and other jobs at the same time?
Just 1 minute.
You don't have to give me the employees' names, but I'm just curious how that could happen if they're working at the city and they're supposed to be working at the city. This is 3 and 2. Is this where we go 3 days, 2 days at home? And I don't know. I'm curious. On page 18 of your report.
Sorry, through the chair, I think I'll need to get back to you on that one.
All right, okay.
Just one question, Chair.
Just for clarity, that's an undertaking to connect with Councillor Nunziata?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, just because I'm just very curious how this could happen, how long it's happened, and, you know, it's very concerning to me.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Crisanti.
Thank you, Chair. No, I just have just one question about the, I believe in your report says you have 130 complaints still pending. So what is holding up these complaints, and what's being done to expedite the solutions or reports back on these complaints?
So sorry, are you referring to the pending disposition, those ones?
Yeah.
Yeah, so those ones are actually pending with our team to review and action. So because complaints come in all the time, so we try to keep up in processing, but there are some that are in the queue waiting for us to take a look at.
Okay, but there's about 130 of them, correct?
That's right. Yeah.
So how long does it take to process? I guess it depends on the nature of the complaint.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
All right, I'm good, Chair. Thank you.
Just to
Yeah,
add to
sorry,
that,
go
though,
ahead.
we have reduced our backlog by significantly this past year. Do you have the numbers handy that you could speak to that?
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
Are there any other questions? Seeing none, members wishing to speak? I'm sorry.
The recommendation moved to.
Councilor Nunziata moves the recommendations. I will just only speak very briefly to express my thanks to the entire team of the Auditor General's office. I know that the fraud and waste hotline is very important, and I've interacted with people that have contacted it and told me how important it was to them. I guess the only gap sometimes is that because of the process, the person that makes the complaint doesn't always find out what happened. But I know I've asked this question before. I receive assurances that everything is checked, and where it warrants it, it's advanced in the right way. And I'm truly appreciative of that, and I know that City Council have seen the results of some of the complaints that have been brought to the Fraud and Waste Hotline, which resulted in larger investigations. So there's a lot of value in this work. So on that, I will ask for a vote to adopt the staff recommendations as moved by Councillor Nunziata. All those in favor? Any opposed? That item carries. And we'll go back to the agenda. Next item is AU 8.3, which is a subject matter audit, the audit of Toronto Shelter and Support Services, warming centers, and winter respite sites, understanding and addressing demand while improving financial accountability to stretch dollars further. We do have a presentation, and if folks can bear with us as we just change over the equipment at the front of the room. Thank you.
So you have. Okay, we're ready to get started.
Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So this presentation is on the results of our audit of the warming centers and winter respite sites. Here with me today is Ina Chan, Deputy Auditor General, and also my team members, Elaine Liu, Tom Fitzmaurice, Ivy Yang, and Patricia Lee. Thank you to my team for their excellent work on this audit. Thank you as well to management and staff, Gord Tanner and his team at Toronto Shelter and Support Services, and Pat Matozo and his team at Corporate Real Estate Management. Thank you for your cooperation and assistance during this audit. And we'd also like to express our appreciation to the program operators for their cooperation. During this presentation, we will start with some background, followed by our audit objectives, and discuss why this audit matters, key audit findings and recommendations, followed by my closing remarks. Toronto Shelter and Support Services Division is providing very valuable and needed services to people experiencing homelessness through its emergency shelters and various programs and supports, helping about 22,000 people in 2023 through its shelter system. The city is also taking action to provide affordable housing for people. Providing temporary emergency shelter is much more expensive than providing assistance to people to move along the housing continuum as shown on this slide, towards more stable, permanent forms of affordable housing, such as supportive housing, subsidized housing, rental subsidies, or housing allowances. However, emergency shelter is still a very important part of the housing continuum. Recognizing that people experiencing homelessness are particularly vulnerable to illness and injury because of exposure to cold temperatures, the division expands its services during the winter season to provide warm indoor spaces. For the 2023-24 winter, this included 5 winter respite sites, 4 warming centers, and 1 surge site, offering 625 beds each night at the peak of the winter season. The scope of this audit included the division's winter programs of warming centers and winter respite sites, which provide a low barrier approach for people to get out of the cold. Our scope did not include the base shelter program for this audit. And before we get into our audit results, I think it's helpful to understand the main differences between traditional shelters and what the winter programs provide. So for someone to access a bed at a shelter or respite program, including winter respite sites, they call the Division Central Intake Line, whereas warming centers operate on a first-come, first-served drop-in basis. And walk-ins are also accepted at winter respite sites. Shelters provide wraparound services for individuals in addition to shelter and meals, such as access to harm reduction and mental and physical health support, as well as case managers to develop permanent housing plans. Case management support is not required for operators of the winter programs, and both winter respite sites and warming centers provide low barrier access. So for example, the person does not need to provide identification. And the intent of the winter programs is to prioritize ease of access to safe indoor space, especially to those who are vulnerable and may not otherwise access shelters. Winter respite sites operate 24/7 during the length of their agreement for the winter period, and warming centers, though, are not 24/7. They are activated when temperatures are expected to fall below -5°C or -15 for surge sites, and or when there is a weather warning issued, for example, freezing rain or a snow squall. Although warming centers and winter respite sites offer less services and amenities than traditional shelters, they are significantly more expensive to operate. Therefore, it's important to ensure they are managed well, both operationally and financially. This audit aimed to answer the following questions. Number one, are individuals experiencing homelessness turned away from winter respite sites and/or warming centers? And number two, are winter respite sites and/or warming centers operated cost-effectively to maximize use of the constrained resources, such as budget, number of sites, and/or number of operators? The city's shelter system is stretched, even with the added capacity of the winter programs. And this risk is further increased as people experiencing homelessness in Toronto are up to 18 times more likely to visit emergency departments for cold weather-related injuries. And according to Toronto Public Health, there were, unfortunately, 5 deaths in Toronto due to hypothermia across the last 3 winter seasons. This audit matters, as it can sometimes be a matter of life or death for people experiencing homelessness during the cold winter weather if they are not able to find a warm indoor place to sleep. Every bed matters, as every life matters, and every dollar can be used to help improve outcomes. Our audit highlights 2 key areas with opportunities for TSSS to continue to improve its winter programs. First of all, to better understand and address demand for winter respite site and warming center beds, and number 2, to improve financial accountability to stretch dollars further. So for the first key area of our audit findings, we found people experiencing homelessness were regularly turned away from the shelter system because it is often operating at or near full capacity. There were 174 unmatched callers on average on a daily basis. However, this number does not reflect total demand. The total demand for beds in winter programs is unknown because TSSS does not track the number of people who walk in to warming centers and winter respite sites and are turned away when beds are not available, and the number of people who stay in overflow spaces, for example, space where there may be a place to sit in a chair indoors but no bed to stay overnight. Collecting more data will help TSSS to better understand demand and plan accordingly. We found that there are opportunities for additional bed nights to be provided if changes are made to TSSS's practices. While we recognize that it is unlikely that TSSS will be able to make every bed at every site available for the entirety of the winter season, action can be taken to make more bed nights available. I'll now pass it over to Ina Chan to discuss these opportunities in further detail.
Thank you, Auditor General. For warming centers, when temperatures are forecasted to rise above -5°C, they deactivate and stop admitting new clients. However, existing clients can continue to stay while TSSS works with the site to match these clients to a space in the shelter system. Since warming centers do not admit new clients while they are deactivated, beds are left vacant as the remaining clients are discharged. This slide shows an example timeline from 2023-24 winter season. Warming centers were activated on January 9th, and then they stopped admitting new clients when they were deactivated on January 22nd. For the period from January 22nd to February 1st, beds were left vacant as clients were referred elsewhere. Meanwhile, there were many unmatched callers to central intake, and temperatures were still below freezing on some days. While some warming centers were eventually able to close once all beds were empty, others could not close before the next activation on February 2nd because clients still remained at the site. What we are highlighting here is there's an opportunity for TSSS to review its practices for warming centers to consider using the beds currently left vacant during periods of deactivation. The chart on this slide shows all the activations and deactivations of warming centers for the 2023-24 winter period. What's important to note here are the red areas, showing the beds that were not available when sites were deactivated. In aggregate, all the areas in red show the 4,331 bed nights left vacant when warming centers were deactivated. As mentioned earlier, the intent of the winter programs is to provide a low barrier approach to get people out of the cold. However, we found that over half of the clients served were either experiencing chronic homelessness or refugees who would benefit from case management and support services. Many of these clients appear to be using the winter programs because the shelters were at full capacity. We've recommended that TSS review its practices to determine if it would be appropriate to make changes so that more beds can be made available during the winter. It's important to note that this can be done within the existing funding constraints, since the division has budgeted for warming centers to be open and operating at full capacity for the entire winter season. During our audit, we also found there are opportunities to potentially provide additional bed nights at winter respite sites. In particular, 8,411 bed nights were not available as certain winter respites at certain winter respite sites for certain periods of time because some programs took time to ramp up to operating at their full capacity. And in the case of the Better Living Center winter respite programs, TSSS held back 60 beds per night until later in the winter season and made them available for the coldest months of the year. Beds were not available because some programs stopped admitting new clients while ramping down their operations and while TSSS worked with the programs to refer clients elsewhere prior to closing the sites. Similar to the warming center deactivation process, many beds were left unused as clients were discharged to other shelter programs. Beds were also not available for some programs that opened after the start date in their agreements. These programs opened late because they needed more time to prepare. On a positive note, for the 2024-25 winter period, beds were not held back at the Better Living Center, and the time frame it took to ramp up operations appears to have shortened slightly, which has helped to provide more beds so far during the 2024-25 winter, which has been colder than last year. In addition, the lease term for the Better Living Center was extended an additional month, which means unlike winter 2023-24, ramp down of operations can occur later and as the temperatures hopefully start to warm up. And also the sites where openings were delayed in 23-24, they were able to open on time during the 2024-25 winter season. Our key recommendations in the area, as summarized on this slide, will help TSSS to better understand demand and to make more beds available. This includes developing a contingency plan for when the system is full and it's cold outside. For example, making use of space in the city's community centers and civic centers when needed. In looking at clients admitted to warming centers and winter respite programs, we also noted that over half of the clients were either refugees or people experiencing chronic homelessness. Additional on-site services and case management could help more clients who are staying at winter programs to transition from homelessness to permanent housing. In response to feedback from the 2023-24 winter season, TSSS is looking at ways it can better serve clients with additional needs. The second key area of audit findings in our report highlights that by improving financial accountability, the division can stretch its fundings further. Improved financial controls should include thoroughly reviewing budgets and costs and promptly reconciling and finalizing third-party operator reported costs. During this audit, we found that operators received the full budgeted amount from TSSS of $12.5 million. Then TSSS was to recover any surplus funds after reviewing and reconciling actual costs spent against their budgets. Although the operators had submitted their final cost reports by July 2024, there was a surplus of nearly $2.9 million that had not yet been recovered by the city as of October 2024, when we had completed the bulk of our audit field work. TSS advised the full amount was subsequently recovered last month, January 2025. Management advised us that the staff shortages and a lack of formal business processes guiding staff on the review of the final cost reports contributed to delays in completing their reviews and recovering surpluses. In general, we also found that TSS staff need to apply more rigor in reviewing reported costs. Staff didn't question or follow up on costs reported by third-party operators that may not be reasonable or appropriate, particularly given the fewer number of days that warming centers and winter respite sites were open during the winter season compared to what was budgeted. We also found that the staff didn't request or obtain source documentation from operators to validate reported costs and explanations provided for variances. In the next slide, we'll walk through an example of an operator reallocating resources without pre-approval to do so. This slide highlights one example in our report where TSSS did not question the reasonableness of catering costs for meals because there was no variance reported between actual and budgeted costs. However, this service provider site was open for just over half of the season, so one would not expect the actual cost incurred to be 100% of the budget. Instead, we would expect costs to factor in the actual number of bed nights provided at the site. So the actual cost would be about 49% of the budget, and this means that there was a variance of just over $59,000 or 104% compared to the prorated budget, which is a significant variance that should have been followed up. It was only in response to our audit inquiries that TSS staff asked the operator for explanations. The service provider then advised that they used the rest of the allocated budget for other sites and programs they operated. Although this may be helping the same vulnerable population, this is not what's outlined in the agreement. Staff were not aware that resources had been used towards other programs, as the operator had not advised staff and had not obtained authorization to reallocate resources elsewhere. Service providers are not currently required to obtain the division's pre-approval for changes. For example, we also identified cases where the operators assigned a different mix or the number and level of staff to a site and at different salaries and benefits than were agreed to when setting their TSSS approved budgets. We've recommended that TSS require their operators to communicate in a timely manner any significant changes that may have an impact on operations or costs and obtain pre-approval from TSSS before such changes are implemented or as soon as possible in the event of an emergency. We also expected that staff would be comparing the budgets of the different service providers and city-operated sites to assess whether rates for similar expense types were reasonable and consistent, but they didn't do so. For the 2023-24 winter season, we found that budgeted and reported costs per bed night varied significantly across operators and sites. At a more detailed level, we also found variances across specific cost categories. For example, the budgeted catering costs per bed night ranged from $26 to $33 daily per person when catering services were contracted or provided by the third-party operator, and ranged from $37 to $46 daily when city contracted for catering services. We also noted that TSSS budgeted significantly more than was needed to operate for the full period for its directly operated warming center. TSSS should establish guidelines for analyzing budgets and reasonable rates for certain costs and compare budgets across sites and programs to identify opportunities to stretch funding further. By doing so, based on the examples identified during the audit and included in the audit report, we estimated that between $1.1 and $1.8 million in funding can potentially be freed up to be used towards providing additional beds across the shelter system and/or more financial assistance to make rental housing more affordable for people needing to access stable housing. Now I'll pass the presentation back to the Auditor General.
Thank you, Ina. So many of the audit observations and recommendations to improving financial controls are also applicable to base shelters, shelter hotels, and year-round 24/7 respite sites. The city incurs significant costs related to these other shelter programs, which include sites that are operated by third-party service providers. In 2023, TSSS paid third-party operators of these other programs approximately $265 million, and in 2024 is tracking to pay even more. Therefore, we've recommended that TSSS should review the recommendations from this audit for applicability to these programs and implement them as appropriate to strengthen financial accountability. So in summary, although TSSS provides many valuable and needed services and aims to ensure beds are available indoors for those experiencing homelessness during the winter season, there are opportunities to improve and do more. We recognize that this is a very challenging area to tackle, but it is critical to make improvements to help get people inside, particularly during the cold winter season, as it can be a matter of life and death. The 15 recommendations provided in our report will help improve the efficiency, effectiveness, and economy of warming centers and winter respite sites, and may also benefit the division's other shelter programs, and management has agreed to all 15 recommendations. Thank you again to management and staff, as well as the operators for their support and cooperation during this audit. That concludes our presentation, and I believe management now has a presentation, and then we're available for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Madam Auditor. May I ask the management team to head to the front? And we'll just take a moment to change over.
So we'll go back to our spots.
Oh, you got it on there already. Great. Welcome, Mr. Tanner and team. Let me know when you're ready and go right ahead.
Good. I think we're ready. So my name's Gord Tanner. I'm the General Manager of Toronto Shelter and Support Services. And good morning, Chair and members of the Audit Committee. Happy to be here with you today to talk a bit more about our winter services and the audit. And really want to thank Tara, Ina, Tom, Elaine for the collaboration on this project, right? We had folks out in the field in warming centers late at night throughout the winter period of 23-24 and seeing the work we do up close, and we always welcome folks to come and take that opportunity, so thank you. So warming centers in our winter plan really are a key component of the city's response to homelessness. In the winter, they provide warm indoor places for individuals to rest and access meals, washroom facilities, referrals to emergency shelters, and other community services. Winter respites are activated for the duration of the winter, 24/7 as low barrier and safe indoor spaces offering resting places, meals, and other supports. And although these continued efforts are an integral part of our response to winter and important measures to support people experiencing homelessness in Toronto, as was noted, the long-term solution to these issues is really more affordable and supportive housing that is more cost-effective and dignified for people. Next slide. So Toronto Shelter and Support Services welcomes the recommendations and the work of this audit by the Auditor General and view this really as an opportunity to further reflect and review our winter response for improvements to continue to provide safe, high-quality service to clients. Most notably, this audit will provide Toronto Shelters the opportunity to enhance year-round planning efforts for our winter response, improve our data collection practices, develop and refine existing financial controls, and strengthen contract oversight of our third-party operators and vendors. Work is already underway to support implementing the recommendations made by the Auditor General. So shelter demand is exceedingly high, and we anticipate that it will remain high throughout 2025. And again, this is due to a variety of reasons, which include the inadequate number of affordable and supportive housing opportunities in the city, increased cost of living, low wages, very inadequate income supports, high inflation, and a lack of access to health and mental health supports. And I think also coupled with currently a variety of geopolitical issues around the world and south of the border, raises a lot of uncertainty with respect to what demand will look like in 2025. But as a result, the city is experiencing increasing levels of homelessness on the street, also in encampments and on our transit system. And during the winter, as was noted, there are more health and safety risks for people experiencing homelessness, and the winter plan is really key to ensuring we provide some surge capacity to the shelter system to be as responsive as possible. So each year, we do develop a winter plan. We usually make that plan public in October, and it usually outlines measures that the city will take to support people experiencing homelessness during the cold season and during extreme cold weather. The 2024-25 plan offers more services at more locations in the city than ever before. So in total, there'll be more than 1,200 additional shelter system and housing spaces available for people throughout this winter period. And it includes adding 150 temporary spaces throughout the shelter system, adding 383 spaces at 24/7 respite centers, activating 248 spaces at 5 warming centers across the city when temperatures reach -5 degrees Celsius, or when Environment Canada, Climate Change Canada issues a winter weather event warning. And also when the temperature hits -15 degrees Celsius, we will open another 170 additional surge spaces for this extreme cold. That's within the shelter system, and this year at 2 additional warming centers at Cecil Community Center and Jimmy Simpson Community Center. We also dispatch additional street outreach teams. Their goal is really just to connect people and encourage those folks who are staying outside to come indoors during the extreme temperatures. And this season also we will bring 286 new supportive and affordable homes online with our partnership with the Housing Secretariat for people to move into those housing units over the course of the winter. This season we also extended our operating hours at several of our daytime drop-in programs. The winter services plan is designed to be adaptive and may evolve based on what we see in terms of demand over the course of a winter and the availability of appropriate locations to add capacity. Next slide. So there are a lot of sort of implementation of our winter plan, let's say challenges, right? And so we work very closely alongside corporate real estate management to look for and secure real estate agreements to secure temporary winter program space that's favorable to the city. But some of the challenges include locating suitable spaces that require minimal capital work or no capital work to make them available very quickly. We also collaborate to ensure service providers are ready and available to stand up programs and operate the spaces as soon as these real estate agreements are finalized. And finally, ensuring that the real estate agreements are cost-effective, negotiated quickly, and aligned within our budget constraints. The reality is many landlords and building owners are not really interested in leasing spaces for short terms or for the perceived risk of these programs, or have existing tenant agreements in place that prevent this kind of residential use of those properties. Once Toronto Shelters has signed a real estate agreement for spaces, teams move very quickly to find an operator and prepare the space for ramp up as quickly as possible. However, here also, there are some challenges for these temporary programs. We need appropriate time to conduct due diligence on spaces, ensuring they meet the building code requirements like fire life safety, as well as accessibility standards. We need to allocate a reasonable amount of time for ramp up of operations, training of staff, for staff to familiarize themselves with the new layout of these spaces, and this does take time. And finally, identifying additional spaces to meet increased demand during the coldest months, requiring real-time adjustments to agreements and capacity without compromising safety. And finally, when opening some of our largest locations, such as the 300-bed Respite that was referred to, we need to take time to open a site like that. We don't open it on the first day and welcome 300 people in on the first day. We actually need a ramp-up schedule accordingly to bring people in a safe way, understand what their needs are, and have them settle as we bring more people into the building. So based on occupancy data from the previous several winters, our winter services plan usually adds about 10% capacity to the shelter system. And the approach to winter response includes securing or sourcing and opening a variety of spaces that activate over the course of the winter season, supporting our third-party operators with sourcing alternative spaces within their existing programs in the base shelter system. And, the steady growth of our shelter system, our base shelter system over the last several years, last 10 years, still does not negate the need for this surge capacity during the winter months. So while challenges persist with sourcing locations to use for winter spaces, we do agree with the Auditor General and the Medical Officer of Health that people experiencing homelessness during the winter are particularly vulnerable to illness and injury due to exposure and cold temperatures. Our efforts focus on improving the delivery of winter services to help people the best we can get inside from the cold. So some of the improvements in the last several years is adding contingency spaces for -15 degrees Celsius, conducting a comprehensive analysis of our winter services compared to those across the country, and hearing from health and homelessness experts and clients to revise our activation criteria, extending daytime drop-in hours to ensure alignment with the opening of warming centers so that we can reduce the amount of time that people spend outdoors, and then conducting a yearly debrief at the end of the season to discuss lessons learned and areas for consideration for the coming winter season. So Toronto's shelter system has, as we've talked about, been operating at its full capacity for some time. And this places pressure on the warming centers, which are supposed to provide that surge capacity and serve people who are traditionally staying outside, come in from the cold. We've really seen them started to be used as shelter programs. And so if warming centers were to be fully activated at the beginning of the winter season at November 15th, we would anticipate that they would fill up very quickly, and we would have no space available in the surge capacity for later in the winter and the coldest months of the year. So the approach taken by Toronto Shelter and Support Services to activating and deactivating warming centers is established on defined criteria. Warming centers are activated when Environment Canada reports temperatures will reach -5 degrees Celsius, or during an extreme weather warning, with, as I mentioned, additional services available when temperatures hit -15 degrees Celsius. We monitor the reports from Environment Canada 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We usually provide a heads up to our service providers about 3 days in advance, letting them know that temperatures will hit the -5 degree threshold. When the decision is made to activate, we notify our operators by 7:30 in the morning to enable them to set up and open by 5 p.m. the same day. Notification for service providers is also posted on our city's shelter management information system to inform our staff that warming centers will be open at 5. We post the information throughout the sector so that clients know that they are opening, and email notifications that warming centers are opening or closing are also sent to members of the public, key stakeholders, elected officials, and media who have signed up for the warming center listserv. Warming centers are deactivated once Environment Canada reports 3 days of weather warmer than -5 degrees Celsius, or -15 degrees Celsius for those surge locations. Once deactivation occurs, warming centers stop taking admissions and focus on referring the clients that they have in the programs into available vacancies in the main shelter system when they become available. So we don't, when we deactivate the sites, just discharge everyone from the programs. We keep those folks and we'll refer them into vacancies as they arrive. Next. So what are the actions we've taken to improve service? So ahead of 23-24 winter season and through a report adopted by council, you'll know that we changed the activation criteria from -15 to -5 degrees Celsius. That really results in the warming centers and the surge capacity being open for more days for more people over the course of a winter. The revision was based on advice from health experts, feedback from community partners, and from service providers. And it reflects our commitment to enhance support for individuals experiencing homelessness during the cold weather. Some of the third-party operators of winter respite and warming centers did have unused portions of their budget during the 23-24 season. And since the audit report and our work with the auditor has been completed, the full $2.9 million has been reconciled with those operators against the 24-25 winter season. For this season also, we've fully executed our contracts with all of the providers, and they've been provided funding for the season. We've also updated our shelter management information system to start tracking clients that would utilize those overflow spaces that we've created in some of the warming centers to better track that data going forward. And finally, we are very committed to implementing the recommendations made by the Auditor General to strengthen not only our winter plan, but also, you know, our oversight of all of the money that we flow through to our third-party providers for the shelter system. So next steps. As part of our commitment, we will be working more closely with corporate real estate management, where feasible, to try and locate and finalize capital work before the start of a winter season to make sure every bed is available for the duration of the season. We will work with the Purchasing and Materials Management Division to assess the feasibility of cost savings on catering contracts and leveraging economies of scale where we can. And internally, I think we'll focus our efforts to review and analyze our services such as deploying case management to some of these programs, assess the feasibility of collecting data on people who are not able to access service, developing a methodology to produce a range of key cost categories for third-party operators, such as wages, implement processes, practices, and procedures to enhance our financial controls, including developing better standard operating procedures and updating service agreements with the third-party operators, and review how the recommendations made in this audit can be applied, as I mentioned, to other shelter programs we operate outside of the winter response. So in closing, I'd just say that, again, we'd like to thank the auditor for their work on our winter services and the in-depth and subsequent recommendations they've made. And we remain committed to acting on and implementing the recommendations to improve our winter services and frankly, those services for folks experiencing homelessness in Toronto. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions of staff. Councillor Nunziata.
Okay, I have a couple questions. So in the presentation that the Auditor General made, as far as that you budgeted more than needed for directly operated sites. So can you tell me the reason for that? Because according to the auditor, that 1.8 million in funding can potentially be freed up for other sites.
Perhaps I'll start through the chair. Just to clarify, the 1.1 to 1.8 million in funding can potentially be freed up, but in terms of the over budgeting on the directly operated, so for meals, it was nearly 516,000 on top of what would be needed for the full season, and for salaries, over 418,000 on top of what would be needed for the full season.
Yeah, but so why did we over budget?
So management?
And to you, Chair, with respect to the budget for our directly operated, the only reason we would have done that is that throughout a course of a winter, we may expand capacity of our winter plan, and so having those resources available, usually we would deploy our directly operated staff to run them. But, you know, in this case, we'll have to look at that going forward to make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah, so I think we need to look at that in the future, like budget what you need. So, one of the recommendations that you put in your report to the Auditor General, recommendation 8, and maybe I can add, is where there, as far as requiring third-party operators of warming center and winter respite sites to obtain pre-approval in writing for any changes that may have an impact on operations or costs. So are you saying that that wasn't done before, that we weren't getting pre-approval?
So I'll start. So through the chair, there's no requirement in the agreement for pre-approval. And we did note through our audit that there was that example where operators reallocated funds without having that pre-approval in place.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Now, there was a previous audit a few years ago, I can't remember when, and there were a number of recommendations that were brought forward by the auditor. I don't know if it was before your time or not, but were all those recommendations implemented? Because I think part of that was third party as well, so that's why I'm asking the question. I just recall the report coming forward, and there was a huge discussion on it. Were they recommended? I mean, did you approve the recommendations that were in the audit report?
Is that the hotel shelter one, or that you're referring to?
The shelter one, yeah.
Hotel shelters?
Yeah.
Yeah, so to the chair, thanks for the question, Councillor. Yeah, it was an audit on our shelter hotel program that happened during the pandemic. Variety of recommendations related to the contracting with the hotels, as well as some case management work. We are now in the process of completing those recommendations and actually just meeting with the auditor to complete our assessment of whether those are indeed complete. And so it's still a piece of work underway that we may be coming back to Audit Committee with an update later this year.
Yeah, because that was a few years ago, so those recommendations should be coming forward shortly, because I think they should have been implemented. I mean, this was during the pandemic, right?
So I'm, through the chair, I'm not aware at this time, so it sounds like
Okay.
we're going to be having a meeting soon about
As a
them.
reminder, I remember all these things, and, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fletcher.
Yeah, I might need a second round. Also, I'll be asking the auditor and her staff questions. But I just want to ask actually the city manager question, because when we're hearing about the shelter division, could you compare the complexity of the shelter division, who's accessing shelters, the surge capacity, the winter versus summer, the programs that are coming online? Is there any other area of the city that matches the complexity of this division, in your opinion? Can you name it?
Chair, no, there isn't. And layered on to what would normally be the most complex system is that we're still recovering from the pandemic. And so the significant changes that had to occur to all shelter systems across the country, we're still catching up from that. So it's not that there isn't hard work and complex work happening anywhere else, but this is one of the most complex operating environments to be involved in because of the types of service. And you know, just as you know, for a decade I ran one of these, and I have a bit of firsthand knowledge of what they're going through. Nothing to the size and scope of what we deal with here in Toronto, but you're correct in your assessment.
If I was to say, Mr. Tanner, that, and to you, Madam Auditor, it's almost as if every day is an emergency. We have an Office of Emergency Management that sets things up temporarily, ice storm, go to community center, get people in there, get the Red Cross, get the food. Oh, nobody came, but you still paid the money for that. Or too many people came. That it's almost on that basis, once we're into the cold weather system, that it's basically operating on an emergency basis. Would you agree with that?
To the chair, that's right. And we have people watching the system on a 24/7 basis to monitor how it's performing and to make adjustments in real time as best we can. Under those, I'd call them emergency
So,
environments.
thank you. And I'm just going to ask you, Madam Auditor, in looking at this as a system in the whole city, the complexity and the nature of having to move quickly, dealing with people's lives, that would you agree that it's practically an emergency footing and you're moving exponentially in a way that you wouldn't be doing if it was the Jimmy Simpson Rec Center compared to the Jimmy Simpson Overnight Warming Center?
So through the chair, yes, this is emergency shelter, so I would agree with that.
So there may be times when somebody didn't reconcile their $59,000 because they're busy doing things, and that hasn't, the focus has been on providing emergency services, not the reconciliation. But you're telling us that you have that staff financially, that you can manage that reconciliation with your contractors in the future, to be clearer.
To the chair, yes. We'll
Okay.
be making some changes to implement tighter financial controls on these contracts.
And, yes?
If I could just add that although it's on an emergency basis, it's not a surprise that the winter is coming and that space is needed or that reconciliations need to be done. So it is something that is done continuously or should be done continuously in terms of the budgeting and analysis.
Yes, but amount of food that was bought compared to the number of people that came, that's not something that you can actually manage. There's going to be a differentiation based on the fact that things are changing every day in this particular system. It's not the Four Seasons Hotel.
So through the chair, I would say that there is budgeting and analysis that can be done for this and improvements that we've noted in our audit.
Improvements, but understanding that the ball's up in the air, that there is an ever-changing environment in all of these sites, depending upon where they are, including in the regular shelter system. Would you agree with that?
So through the chair, there are agreements in place at the start of the winter season, so it is well known before the winter starts where the locations will be and the capacity that's expected.
Expected, but you can't always guarantee it.
Yes, you
So
can't
in the
guarantee.
notion that you'll move to housing, get people, case managers to move them to housing, we're moving people basically to supportive housing. You're not moving them into, and if you do move them into regular housing, like in Toronto Community Housing, now you have a problem for independent living. Would you agree with that?
To the chair, wraparound supports for people moving from these programs are essential, whether it's in private market or ideally in
Right.
supportive housing.
So a case manager, how many people would they actually get to move into housing? How many case management situations did you have to move people into housing in the winter?
I mean, over the course of 2024, we moved 4,300 people into housing. We have housing workers across the system doing that work.
Yeah, I'm talking about, okay, but anyway, I know where a lot of them went. I'm not sure they had the wraparound supports, but that could be another thing that the auditor could look at.
We'll go to a second round in
Thank
just a
you.
moment. Yep,
Thank you.
thank you. Further questions? Councillor Myers.
And myself, Chair.
Councillor Grisanti, second. Yep.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I'm just still not understanding why the decision was made to turn people away when beds were available just because it was just because it was above -5.
To the chair, so, we have,
Hang on just one moment, Mr. Tanner. Councillor Myers, there's just a little bit of sound distortion. I wondered if you could repeat that for the room.
Sorry about that. I just wanted to know, I'll log into my phone as well. I just want to know why the decision was made to turn people away from empty beds just because the temperature was above -5.
Thanks, and that was clear.
Okay, I'll speak louder. I'll speak closer to my computer.
so to the chair, these are surge winter programs that are activated at -5 degrees Celsius. That is why they're operating in the winter, and that is the criteria upon which, through council, we operate our winter plan. It has changed. It used to be -15 degrees Celsius when these programs would open, and now it is at -5. The last point I'd make, Councillor, is just that the season of 23-24 was a much more milder season, if you will. And so there was a lot more activation, deactivation that was happening over the course of the winter. I can tell you this winter, our warming centers have been open and fully operating since January the 3rd. And we expect they'll continue to operate through the course of February and perhaps into early March.
So if that's the case, but we've prepaid for these services to be opened potentially every day of the winter, correct?
To the chair, we did budget for these programs to be available every day over the course of the winter. That's correct.
So if we can forecast the temperature, and we know that we've already paid for these services, and we know that we're turning people away, even if it's above -5, wouldn't we just open them up since we have already developed the capacity?
So to the chair and councillor, I mean, this is an excellent question. It is our experience that when we open, and again, these are surge winter programs, when we open them, they can fill up over the course of 2 or 3 days till maximum capacity. If we do that in November, the 15th, there will be no surge capacity left come December, come January, come February. So, you know, this is not ideal, but this is surge capacity. This is adding space so we can bring folks who are the hardest to reach under bridges, in parks, into these spaces to make sure they're available in the coldest temperatures. We are, as you know, building out our shelter system currently with 20 new shelters over 10 years so that we have more capacity 24/7, 365 days a year. But these services we're talking about, in my experience, are meant to be a surge response during the coldest nights of the year.
Right, but why would we want people, if we have the space available, and I get that they fill up, wouldn't we want people sleeping indoors if that's a possibility versus sleeping outside if we've already paid and developed these services? I understand what you're saying, but if there are people who need the services now, why are we withholding the services that are available that have already been paid for in the event that something could eventually happen? Like, why wouldn't we deal with that problem when it happens or develop that additional surge capacity as needed?
So to the chair, and again, I'll just share my experience with you while here at the city. In past very cold winters, when we have not had capacity in the coldest months of the year, January, February, we've had to scramble to find hundreds of additional spaces that are very difficult to find on a short notice. Again, I'd say that if we are wanting to build out the base shelter system and have services available all the time, that is something we are doing in conversations in communities right across the city. But this is surge capacity that currently operates under criteria that we could amend. And obviously, you know, based on the auditor's work here, we're going to look at and see if there are refinements that we can make to that process for the upcoming season. I just want to underline what these services are meant to provide and when.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Crisanti.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And so to staff, so we have operators and we have contracts with each operator. And what period of time do we give operators to prepare and open up? And when does the funding actually activate? At the point they're actually open and operating, or before that?
To the chair, you know, the operators of these programs are, for the most part, already operating base shelter programs, and we would contract with them to add this service to their suite of services. We ideally are contracting with them for the period of time that they are open over the course of our winter season from November 15th to April 15th, although there may be some upfront costs for them to hire staff and train staff so that they are prepared to work in these services once they're activated.
But they still need preparation to activate the contract, correct? Even though they're currently operating, they still have to ramp up.
To the chair, you're right, Councillor. The staff teams need to ramp up in these new environments that we have them operating in. That requires training, safety training, and setup of the beds, the cots, the meal service, all those kind of things. Yes.
Okay, thank you. And just to Councillor Fletcher's question about, you know, I think we know the answer in part, but things have changed dramatically over a number of years. Who's accessing the shelters today? You know, we know there's homeless. And how much do refugees play into this?
Perhaps I can start. So through the chair, we did find that over half of the clients accessing the winter programs were either refugees or people experiencing chronic homelessness. And so they would benefit from case management support.
All right. Now, of course, it's been all over the weather report the last couple of days. Are expecting a major winter storm tonight. And it could be very significant. Are we prepared? Are we going to have access to, this isn't a particular, no night's a good night in the winter, but this night, tonight particularly, and overnight and tomorrow, are we prepared to make sure we bring everybody into some form of shelter?
To the chair, Councillor, thanks for that question. So we are in the midst currently of activating what we call alternate spaces right across our base shelter system for this evening in advance of the coming storm.
So you're confident that we're in good shape and we're not going to leave anybody behind tonight as a result of this?
To the chair, we will do as much as we can this evening to get as many people indoors as we possibly can.
Thank you, and good luck with that. I hope that all works out well. Slide 20 on the presentation. Just a quick question on that, on the variance. If you recall that slide, you indicated there's a variance, and it went to apparently some of that money went to other sites. Can you explain this? Is this a one-time thing, and has it happened before?
So through the chair, in our audit, we did find one operator where there was an amount that they reallocated to one of their other programs. Although that was the only reallocation that we found, we did find other examples where operators were using different staffing mix and salaries and benefit levels than was agreed to in their approved budget with TSSS.
Lower or higher?
So go on, sorry, something else you want to add?
That was it, thank you.
All right, I'm good, Chair. Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you. I'm going to take a moment to ask a few questions, and then we'll go to our second round. I think the first one for Mr. Tanner. I want to make sure I understand this. So the base shelter system is the largest component. Do I understand correctly that most of the people that are in there are either housing ready or getting housing ready and waiting for a permanent housing solution, whether it's a subsidized home or one with wraparound support, you know, the whole spectrum. The respite sites are individuals that, for one reason or another, didn't make it into the base shelter system. Help me break that down. I'm going to try to recap what I read and make sure I understand it. But some are refugees, and some are maybe other people that would be considered as ready to enter the base shelter system. Some would be individuals that, for one reason or another, are incompatible with the base shelter system. That either it's not suitable to them, or they have factors such as addiction or issues around others that make them difficult to house in that, so that it's a more transitory environment. And then the final layer are warming centers. where those are individuals that can walk up, or they can, actually can't even call in, that they walk up to those because they don't use the respite centers. Do the people in the respite centers stay overnight and for extended periods of time? And do the people in the warming centers do the same thing, or are they more transitory?
Yes, to the chair, I think your summary of what the goal of these programs are is aligned with why we operate them.
So matching people to a place to stay is complicated. Can you help me understand the numbers and what the concept of not being matched means? The plain read is, someone says, I'd like to go there. And they say, I'm sorry, there's no space, you've got to wait. But is it more dynamic than that? For instance, that shelter doesn't work, or they're waiting to get to a certain place. Could you help me understand that number? I don't want to make any assumptions on it.
No, sure. So to you, Chair, the very diverse shelter programs we operate, whether by gender, by age, by ethnicity. We have Indigenous programs. So there's a whole mix of different programs within the somewhat 10,000 beds in the base shelter system. We do our best through central intake when they call us to match people to the appropriate beds within the system. Some people, when we have a bed to offer, may not accept that bed, don't want to go there. We may not have an alternative for them. So each day, currently, last night, for example, we had 100 people that called central intake that couldn't be matched to an appropriate bed. I can't tell you what happened with those folks, if they found a place with a friend, or they went to a family member, or they stayed outside. But that would be the data from last night that I can share with you.
So I want to make sure I understand it. Unmatched isn't totally congruent with there was no space. It's just they weren't matched. Presumably within that are people that they said there was no space. For somebody that's living in a respite site, how long does it take to go from the respite site into the shelter system, provided they see it as a compatible place to go, right? They want to go. Is it, and I know it may be hard to be precise, but is it typically hours, days, or weeks?
It could be days or weeks.
Okay. And what would be the drivers that affect the days or weeks? Is it space, or is it more factors?
Primarily space, I would suggest, yeah.
Okay. I'm going to ask a couple of other ones quickly. I wondered if somebody could just help me interpret figure 6 in the Auditor General's report, and also the other figure, which is the sawtooth one. If you just take a couple of seconds for each, just to make sure I understand what I'm reading. I won't ask any more after that, but just tell me what they're trying to tell us, these two diagrams.
Through the chair, figure 6, so I didn't catch the second one, but figure 6, which is on page 23 of the report, I think that's the one that you're talking about, is showing in red the number of unmatched callers to central intake on any given night during the winter season. So the red line shows it fluctuates day by day, kind of in that the average I think was whatever I had. And then the blue line is the number of beds that were left vacant at warming centers while they were deactivated. So you'll see peaks in those number of beds left vacant as they are deactivating and people are referred to another spot in the shelter system, more beds become vacant. So the blue line shows the number of beds that are vacant in the warming centers on those given nights where people are calling central intake to look for a bed. That's figure 6. And then I didn't catch the second one you wanted an explanation for. I think that's the one in the slide. It's figure 5 on page 22. And so what this is showing, in blue, it's all the activations and periods of activation for warming centers. What's important here is the red portions of the graph, and that actually shows, again, the vacant beds that are at the warming centers while they're deactivated. So in total, all of the red parts of that graph total 4,331 bed nights that were left vacant as the warming centers were deactivated.
Thank you. Councillor Fletcher, you indicated a second round with the consent of the committee. Let's begin.
Thank you. Just to go back to the question from Councillor Myers, what I heard you say is if you open up and let people stay, those essentially become shelters at that point. They're no longer surge capacity, and that's the reason, that's the city policy, that then we'd have to find more for surge capacity. Did I hear that right?
That's correct, Councillor.
Okay. Do you have a sense, either Auditor, Madam Auditor, or Mr. Tanner, if you were to put these on a map and geolocate the respites and the warming centers, where would they be in the city? In Etobicoke, North York, Scarborough, Toronto, East York?
So through the chair, there is a map in our report.
Yep.
Ina, if you want to. Sorry.
They are downtown for the most part. You know, we have one in your ward.
Oh, I understand. I'm just looking for that.
And there's one in
Auditor
Scarborough.
will show me that.
We don't have any in the west in Etobicoke.
Okay, so, and how many people over the winter season would you accommodate in general, total number of folks looking to get out of the cold, basically?
I believe we, in the auditor, identified about 2,000 unique individuals that had used the system over the course of the 23-24 season.
Through the chair, that's correct. And just to follow up, it's page 14 in our report that has the map of the locations for the warming centers and winter respite sites.
That's from 23-24, but we don't have the 24-25 one yet, but thank you very much for that. And then just as an aside, for citing the new shelters in your 10-year capital plan, currently there's some issues. You're having some difficulties in citing new shelters that might not be, you just are, correct? So it's not as easy as it looks. Could I say that?
These are very difficult conversations, not as easy as it looks to cite new shelters, yes.
And there's a little community pushback on having a permanent shelter in a community.
That's correct.
The other issue is, for me, just the holdbacks. And what we're talking about is your ability to hold back. You're talking about people that you're trying to move them into a place, and they still have a right to say, I don't want to go there, right?
That's correct.
So you may offer 2 or 3 places, really trying to get somebody off the street and into a permanent home, but they may not want to go to that location, or that location. So the holdback policy, is that a city policy that you've been using that's been approved in order to try to get people finally into a location?
So to the chair, we do, with our encampment work, hold some specific beds to hold for folks who we may talk to once, twice, 10 times before they agree to come indoors. And I think also this piece that the auditor described as holding back beds for the coldest months is for the coldest months.
So the holdback isn't that you're somehow not providing a bed. The holdback is a policy into the shelter system for, I'll just call them chronic homelessness, to get them inside at some point or another. Is that right?
To the chair, yes.
And the folks that are I'm not going to go into just going to regular housing. There was a moment where, and I just want to be clear how that 1.8 million, 1.1 to 1.8 million dollars can be freed up for housing. I'm not sure that that would be, Ms. Bond is here, I think, that's an amount that could be used for very much housing. That might be used to build 2 units if we were using it for capital. What potential other use would there be for housing for 1.1 to 1.8 million dollars? Because it would not be building anything or significantly moving anybody into permanent housing.
To the chair, I think the auditor was using an example of a housing allowance and how many housing allowances or months of housing allowance that could be made available for.
How many would that be then? How many months of housing allowance? would 1.8 or 1.18 be? Do you have a quick answer? Sorry to put you on the spot. Okay.
So
Housing
the
allowance?
average COB benefit we have right now is about $1,000 a month. So I'm not going to do the mental math in my head, but I can do it. Come back to you shortly.
Somebody, I'm sure
Chair.
one of our CAs can do that mental math.
So through the chair, we based it on an average of $1,300 a month housing allowance. And so for 1 year, that would be, the 1.1 million would be 70 households for 1 year, and the 1.8 million would be 115 households at an average monthly benefit of $1,300 a month.
For 1,300 for the housing. So
I
that actually ends up, sorry?
I was just going to confirm that's good math. And
Okay,
thank you, Ina.
of course. This is what they do, math, so that's good. Thank you. But just for that, I think, would you agree with me, Madam Auditor, if everybody who's in the system understood that those overages that exist in returning them, that we'd be able to house up to 150 families a year with the housing allowance, that might make it more understandable, that reconciling your dollars, it's not that you can use it for something else, but now you're keeping people out of a housing allowance, if that's what it would be used for.
If I could just interject, Councillor, the one factor that I think needs to be accounted for here is that once an individual is housed, there are ongoing sustainment costs related to that housing allowance. So we are looking at a one-time cost savings versus a commitment for ongoing sustainability. So the math would have to be factored in there as well.
Okay, so
But
that
your
needs
point's
to be
taken.
clear too.
We could leverage
it's
that for more help.
one-time. So are we talking this as one-time funding out of this, or how would it become perpetual?
Through the chair, the savings are based on the operation of the winter season. And so that's typically included in the budget annually. And so if we're taking an annual amount that's in the budget and then applying it to housing allowances, that would again be an annually recurring amount.
Right, okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor. I'll check. Any other questions in the second round?
Sorry, I just want to make one point. I know you're correct. That would be an annual amount, but that annual amount would be attributed to the 1,300 once. So that would be a one-time effort because that 1,300 would have to sustain those tenancies ongoing, which means we wouldn't be able to, in the following year, likewise move 1,300 people out. That's the challenge with sustaining ongoing
Follow up on this
subsidy.
question.
It's increasing cost each year.
Just to follow up on that,
For expediency, please follow up.
just because then that 1.8, that would simply come off of the shelter budget because it wasn't used, or the shelter budget would remain the same and that 1.8 or 1.1 would be used in a different way that would be able to be reconciled because it's not a turnover amount of money. It's not sustainable, is what I'm hearing for a housing allowance. So for go to permanent housing, it doesn't really work unless it moves somehow over to Mr. Rollins permanently. So are you suggesting that that budget be cut by that amount that wasn't used, or that it's, I'm unclear?
So through the chair, no, I'm not suggesting the budget be cut. We're just pointing out that there's different uses the city can make of that funding that we identified that could be potentially freed up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Members wishing to speak? Board member? Councillor
Yeah,
Fletcher, would you like to
I'm
move it?
going to speak, and I want to thank the auditor, I want to thank the shelter division staff, and I think that as I asked Mr. Johnson and said, is there any more complex division than this one? I think there isn't. It is the most complex division. We're dealing with upwards of 10,000 people that have nowhere to live. And I'm sure for you and your staff, Madam Auditor, it is certainly, it's not as if you're running a rec program. It's so, I think that you used that word, Chair, dynamic, that it's constantly dynamic. And this is the commitment of the city to make sure that people are not freezing to death in the winter I do have to thank Mr. Tanner and your staff for their Herculean effort in what really is an emergency service that you're offering every year in these very, very cold times. There are, noting where these are and the capacity of housing 2,000 people inside, that they are generally in Toronto and East York. There's a few in other locations. And I just want to comment on the difficulty of establishing new shelters, permanent shelters where people are not coming and going, where we're not holding back beds, where you're not wondering if it's going to be -5 or -15, but you actually have a place to go, which is transitional to get you into housing. And that this is a real life difficulty in our city right now, I think in 3 locations where we're having a very big pushback from the community. So I'm not sure how to, I'm not suggesting, Mr. Chair, that the auditor should deal with that. I'm just saying this is a real reality of trying to make sure people are not freezing in the cold while we're still on this continuum of housing, trying to move them into shelters, because the graphic that the auditor has in her presentation, which is the housing continuum, is one that Ms. Bond actually developed years ago. And I think most of these people that we're talking about are stuck at the first level, are actually stuck on the outside level. They haven't even moved into the shelter level. So this is a real, it's a terrible situation to have for our city. And I thank you, Mr. Tanner, for being clear on the holdbacks, because that's a question that comes up, and even Councillor Myers was saying, why don't we just let everybody in right now? And there are always reasons that might not seem logical if you're just trying to get people inside. But from the operational standpoint of something that's so complex as this, to balance all the needs, then I do understand that there are a certain number of beds held back. And I think the Auditor General understands that, and I appreciate your understanding of that, because sometimes it might not be understood in the best way. I agree that if you're having contracts and somebody says you're going to buy this much food, then you should be buying that much food. And probably because everybody who's running a shelter, you're not running the Four Seasons Hotel here, people. You're running a Respite, you're running a drop-in, you're running a warming center. And if you have some extra money and you can buy a few things for some of the people that are there, or make it simple, or have some clothes clean, I think that's probably what you would do. Or bring somebody else on in order to be a case manager. So I don't know how those funds were used, but I'm going to assume, I know they weren't pocketed by anybody, I'm assuming they were used for the clients, which is a very difficult, let's admit it, it's a very difficult client group. There is no more difficult client group than this client group that we're talking about in our shelter system and in our drop-in shelter system. So this is very helpful to, over the years, just be refining what happens in the most complex division that we have in the city. If Mr. Dayton has classes that aren't filled in the community center, they're just not filled. If they're not filled in the shelters, now we're worried because somebody might not be doing yoga, but then somebody doesn't have a roof over their head. They're still in the cold. It's a very different approach. It's very complex. And I think that in this report, the Auditor General has lifted that up to understand the real complexity of dealing with all these folks. This also just quickly, Mr. Chair, leads me back to all of the Airbnb conversations that I've started, because if we have large numbers of properties, large numbers of units, large numbers of condos that are held off the market because people are running them as Airbnbs, like these 2 addresses we're going to talk about later in camera, then I'm concerned that we're not hard enough on that to free up capacity for where people need to live. I think they're the same thing. I see I am out of time, but I'm going to come back to that when we go back to Airbnb and the Auditor 22-23. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Will you move the staff recommendations?
Yes, I will.
Great. Any other members wishing to speak? Seeing none, Councillor Fletcher moves the staff recommendations. All those in favor? Any opposed? That item carries. Our next item is AU 8.4, which is the audit of Parks Branch Operations, Phase 2, supporting vibrant parks by improving park assessment, asset management, and repair processes. And we have a presentation from Madam Auditor General. We'll just take a moment to get the equipment set up, and Madam Auditor, as soon as you're ready, please begin.
Okay. I think we're ready to start now. Thank you, Chair. So you may recall that in October 2024, we presented the results of the first phase of our audit of Parks Branch operations, which focused on the efficiency of daily park maintenance activities and compliance with the established service level standards. This audit report presents the results of the second phase. The focus of this audit was on the Parks Branch's processes related to non-capital repairs and maintenance of various park assets and amenities, park inspections, and public complaints. I'd like to acknowledge my team for their excellent work on this audit. Ina Chan, Deputy Auditor General, Angela Rafalovich, Senior Audit Manager, and Taklin Chin, Audit Manager. We'd like to express our sincere appreciation for the cooperation and assistance we received from Howie Dayton, General Manager of the Parks and Recreation Division, and Donna Kovachis, Director of the Parks Branch. During this presentation, we'll discuss why this audit matters, outline our audit objectives, key audit findings and recommendations, followed by my closing remarks. This audit matters because ensuring the ongoing maintenance and repair of park assets and amenities is key to ensuring safe and well-functioning public spaces, and these parks play a vital role in enhancing the quality of life for people of all ages. This audit aimed to address whether parks maintenance and non-capital repair needs were being identified, prioritized, and addressed in a timely manner. Our audit scope focused on maintenance and non-capital repairs that fall within the mandate of Parks Branch's Technical Services Group. The Technical Services workforce includes 205 permanent and approximately 55 temporary seasonal staff. Our report includes key audit findings and recommendations in the following 3 areas. First of all, improving park maintenance inspections and monitoring of the resolution of deficiencies. Secondly, implementing consistent practices for repair-related service requests and work order tracking. And finally, to establish a comprehensive system for monitoring public complaints from intake to resolution. I'll now pass it over to Ina Chan to walk us through the key audit findings and recommendations.
I will first speak to some opportunities to improve parks maintenance inspections and monitoring to ensure deficiencies identified through these inspections are resolved. Parks Branch conducts semi-annual parks maintenance inspections and other ad hoc inspections through the year. The inspections are conducted to ensure that parks are safe and that the amenities are in working condition. Through these inspections, deficiencies are identified, which are repair needs that need to be addressed by technical services or other groups. Often, the deficiencies identified reflect minor repairs needed to improve the condition of small assets or amenities like playground equipment, benches and picnic tables, lighting, and water fountains. These inspections are not meant to address the capital state of good repair requirements for large assets or facilities. When repair needs are identified, they should be tracked through to their resolution by the Technical Services Group via work orders. It's important to ensure work orders are promptly created to prevent delays in addressing high priority repair needs. For a sample of repair deficiencies identified by park staff Through their maintenance inspections, we found that although over half of the work orders were created promptly, there are about 30% where deficiencies did not have a work order created promptly or at all, or a deficiency may have reoccurred, meaning a new work order was needed but was not created. Additionally, for about 14%, the responsibility for repairs was transferred to others to be completed as general parks maintenance, seasonal servicing, or capital repairs. And it's difficult to obtain a complete view of actions pending or taken to respond to these repair needs because there's no end-to-end tracking from identification to resolution in a single integrated system. During the audit, staff from our office also conducted site visits to 40 parks across the city, covering 14 wards and different park classifications. Using the same set of standards that are in the Parks Maintenance Inspection tool, our staff identified 99 deficiencies which are repair needs in these parks. Only about 20% of the repair needs we identified were also identified through Parks Maintenance inspections conducted during the same season. The remaining repair needs noted during our visit were not identified. While some of the variance may be attributed to the timing of the park inspections and our site visits, the differences noted may also be indicative of inconsistencies in the approach to maintenance inspections performed by park staff. This slide illustrates examples of repair-related deficiencies we identified that were not noted in parks maintenance inspections. The top row of photos shows a few examples of deficiencies representing 22% of our sample that fall within the scope of repairs taken care of by technical services and should have been identified, tracked, and resolved. The bottom row of photos shows a few examples of deficiencies representing 14% of our sample that management advised are considered lower in priority and not ordinarily tracked through parks maintenance inspections. Based on the observations from our site visits, we've recommended that more robust guidelines be provided to guide staff through the inspection process, including clearer direction on how to document the inspection results, defining the timeframes and follow-up actions on identified deficiencies, including creating work orders, and clarifying roles and responsibilities for monitoring that follow-up action has occurred. The next area of our key audit findings is in implementing consistent practices for repair-related service request and work order tracking. The Parks Branch does not have a formal policy for creating, tracking, and closing work orders. Consequently, work order practices differ between the 4 districts. Management advises the current work order system does not fully meet their needs. Consequently, work order management processes were found to be largely manual. These manual processes slow down task completion, increase administrative burdens, and diminish the quality and reliability of system data. Inaccurate, incomplete, and out-of-date information in the work order system also limits management's ability to use the data to monitor and improve operations. Management has advised that together with the Technology Services Division, they intend to accelerate the implementation of a new work order system through a phased rollout starting in 2025. Also shown by the chart on the slide, we noted variations from district to district, both in terms of volume of work orders created to address identified repair needs, as well as the proportion of work orders that are categorized as high priority. Given that there are 1,500 parks and many assets managed by the Parks Branch, with constraints on both staffing and budget, proper prioritization of work orders will help the branch to focus its technical services resources on the tasks that have the greatest impact on safety, service quality, and operational continuity. We've recommended that the Parks Branch establish consistent, robust criteria for prioritizing service requests as emergency, high, medium, and low or no priority. We've also found that the work order management system is not being used effectively to track and monitor work order status to ensure repairs are completed on a timely basis. There are a significant number of open work orders dating back many years in SAP. During our audit, we randomly selected higher priority work orders open between January to July 2024 for review. And based on paper or manual records, we found that 90% were completed but not closed in SAP. Where we could, we conducted additional site visits to physically observe the work was completed. In reviewing work records, we also noted that Parks Branch should implement procedures to improve record keeping and accountability for daily activities of technical services staff, including the use of GPS. Our findings highlight opportunities to modernize systems and processes to improve oversight, increase monitoring, and address procedural gaps in confirming required repairs have been completed and work orders are closed in a timely manner. Parks Branch should establish service level standards as well, setting expectations for completion timeframes and measure performance to ensure repairs are promptly completed. Lastly, the audit also highlights opportunities for Parks Branch to establish a comprehensive system for monitoring public complaints from intake to resolution. As discussed at the October 2024 Audit Committee, there is no centralized system in place to track, log, and manage public complaints effectively. Currently, the Parks Branch does not have the detailed data on the nature of the calls received through 311 and cannot identify how many calls resulted in maintenance or service requests. Similarly, information on the nature or location of complaints emailed to the Parks Branch directly is not readily available. We also found complaint resolution timelines are not always followed, and we've recommended that the Parks Branch review and update its complaints policy and improve compliance with targets for assessing, acknowledging, and resolving complaints received from Torontonians. Management advised that the planned service integration between 311 and the Parks and Recreation Division will provide improved and more consistent call resolution, accessibility, and communication for parks-related concerns. And now I'll turn the presentation back to the Auditor General for closing remarks.
Thank you, Ina. So in conclusion, the Parks Branch plays an important role in managing the amenities and assets in parks to ensure they are operable, clean, safe, and meet the needs of communities. This report includes 9 recommendations to improve policies, procedures, processes, and systems supporting how the Parks Branch tracks and manages maintenance and repair needs. Management has agreed to all the recommendations and in some cases has already started taking action to respond. We'd like to express our sincere appreciation for the cooperation and assistance we receive from management and staff of the Parks and Recreation Division. That concludes our presentation. I believe management now has a presentation and then we're available for any questions you may have.
Thank you. We'll just give a moment to change over the equipment at the front, and I'll welcome the management team to begin their presentation as soon as they're ready.
To the chair, I'm ready to begin, so we're good.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for the opportunity to share Parks and Recreation Management's response to the Phase 2 Parks Audit. I, too, want to thank the Auditor General and her team for all of the collaboration throughout the process. The public deserves clean, beautiful, well-maintained parks and the assurance that we have the systems and processes in place to meet that expectation. The Phase 2 report provides us with important areas of focus, including how we inspect, document, track, and more consistently address repair issues, while also providing the public with more effective ways of contacting the city about a park service request. We are in agreement with all 9 of the Auditor General's recommendations. To give you a sense of the span of work involved, technical services staff maintain assets in the city's 1,500 parks. Assets include 400 plus pools, splash pads, and ornamental fountains, 13,000 benches, 800 playgrounds, 700 drinking fountains, 180 park washrooms, 50 artificial ice rinks, and 300 kilometers of park pathways and trails. We need to provide staff with clear and achievable direction, with the modern tools they need to do their jobs effectively. Solutions include modernizing our technology systems, improving our administrative processes, including policies, training, and management oversight, communicating service levels clearly, and ensuring our work is done well and in a timely manner. We are also going to integrate with 311 to ensure the public has reliable ways in which to communicate with us about parks-related matters, and we are transitioning to a work order management solution to ensure we can track and monitor progress. The Phase 2 audit is focused on a functional unit within the Parks Operation branch of the Parks and Recreation Division, Parks Technical Services. This unit works in 3 teams: Parks Construction, repair park assets and amenities, and they carry out small construction projects. Property Management and Trade performs plumbing and electrical repairs. They also activate and deactivate our seasonal assets and facilities, such as park washrooms. Property Maintenance and Mechanics maintains small engine equipment, such as leaf blowers, grass cutters, and Zambonis. Technical Services has 260 full-time equivalent staff, 205 of which are permanent, and 55 being temporary. As previously said, processes are currently manual. However, the end state of a fully integrated 311 and work order management system, along with the required policies, guidelines, and service standards, will allow management to more effectively manage its work and be more responsive to the public. In terms of the findings, the 3 areas of focus are noted on the slide. Inspections need to be comprehensive, with deficiencies more consistently identified and resolved in a timely manner. Repairs, where required, need to be prioritized using a consistent set of standards, tracked properly, handed off where needed, and overseen for quality. And public complaint processes need to be integrated with 311 so that they can be tracked and meet established response times. Included in management's response is a robust and an accelerated plan to address the findings for which work is already advancing. Regarding the recommendations related to inspections, work is well underway to review and close historical open work orders, update training and procedures for inspections, modernize the way staff submit and track work orders with the new online system, which is in system design now, the enterprise work management solution, and developing system for tracking repairs by other service areas. With respect to repairs, parks will be leveraging the quality assurance tools implemented following the Phase 1 audit to better account for staff time, location, and results. Management will carry out regular reviews of work orders that are open, and benchmarks and KPIs are being developed to ensure repairs are completed on time and to high and consistent standards. And finally, as I've mentioned previously, the end-to-end integration of 311 with the Parks branch and the work order management system is fundamental to our ability to most effectively respond and address service requests. This slide illustrates current and future processes regarding service requests and complaints. The current state requires the public and councilors to submit their service requests, which can include inquiries about an outdoor rink schedule, for example, or to report something is broken. Those can come in through 311, by email, or direct to staff. Because of a lack of integrated system and the multi-channels that exist, we are unable to appropriately track how these are routed, closed, and we are unable, as is 311, to follow up with the resident. The integration project will require that all service requests come in through 311 going forward, and once fully implemented, automatically route service requests that require divisional follow-up to the appropriate person or area responsible. The division will have a prioritization system to triage these, assign them, have them completed, tracked, reported, and closed in a work order management system with the proper closeout to 311 in the resident. The system, once fully implemented and adopted by the operation, will be far more efficient and far less manual, providing management with the kind of data required to understand trends and where additional supports are required. With respect to inspections and repairs, under the current process, inspections occur in a number of ways, including twice annual inspections, which are scheduled at each park, playground inspections, asset management programs, and general maintenance, all of which can identify a deficiency. What we need and will be implementing are improved procedures and training that will result in a consistent inspection program that identifies, classifies, and organizes deficiencies and repair solutions within an established time period appropriate to the kind of repair needed. We also don't have effective handoff processes, particularly with other service providers where technical services doesn't have the tools to complete the repair, for example, when it is determined to be a capital project. The future state seeks to improve that process with guidelines, training procedures, and robust inspection tools, digital activity sheets, and a more effective work order management system for tracking purposes. Measured against established KPIs, we'll be better equipped to track completion rates and trends related to the types of deficiencies and any geographical trends that we are seeing. As I noted earlier, work is already underway. All told, though, these changes do represent a significant change management and culture change within parks and builds on work we are already advancing as part of the Phase 1 response. In fact, we need to treat these matters holistically because of the interconnectivity of parks operations and maintenance. The following slides break the implementation plan into those items we are advancing now and through Q2 of this year, which includes process change with respect to quality assurance and how current inspections are carried out, closures of open work orders, and a prioritization approach. The latter half of the year, we will advance the 311 integration, interim tracking systems, and update policies and training, noting manual back-end processes will remain while awaiting the full implementation of the work order management system. Finally, in 2026, the division will transition work orders to the new enterprise work management solution mentioned earlier. In addition, we will have the key performance indicators rolled out and measured against. That concludes my presentation. Appreciate the opportunity to present and happy to take questions.
Thank you, Mr. Dayton. Questions of staff? Councillor Fletcher.
Oh, yeah, I've got a lot. We know. Just on non-capital repairs, there's only 205 permanent full-time employees for 1,500 parks to do all the fixes that have come in.
To the chair, that's correct. That's how many employees we have in this park technical services group to both do the fixes, but also the maintenance areas.
So this grass cutting, this isn't regular maintenance. It's the kinds of things that we see that are broken or chipped or whatever.
Correct. It's not parks operations like grass cutting, horticulture.
So in other words, they're a little more specialized. You have to know how to fix something that's dripping, fix something that's cracked, fix something. They're technical guys. They're not gals. They're
Correct.
not cutting the grass or raking. They're not raking the ball diamonds.
Correct. We have carpenters, general handiworkers, small engine mechanics, and electrician and plumbers, those sorts of skilled trades.
So these are the skilled trade workers. And in the past, I think we've contracted a lot of that out, have we not? Have we not lost a lot of employees of this nature in the city that had a lot of knowledge about different parks and what went on, and have we not, or have we?
To the chair, there have been some contracting out of some of these positions, that's correct.
Or job loss in these positions. So
as we contract out, then over time, we've reduced the skilled trade complement.
So how many contracted out positions are there?
We'd have to get back with the exact number of how many have contracted out over time.
I'm gonna need more than one round. Why? Oh, we'll be finished by 2. Maybe. Sorry, was there an answer? You don't have the answer.
we'd have to get back on the number of staff that have been contracted or where the complement may have been redeployed to other work, not necessarily reduced complement, but.
So the technical services, which is cleaning up and making sure. So for this pictures that I brought last time of these chairs at Woodbine Beach with all the slats, who would that be? Your technical services or your regular maintenance?
It would be technical services to repair that.
Technical services, so along the beaches. I just want to go back to 90% were completed, but they weren't signed off. Did I hear that right? Of the ones you know about?
To the chair, that's correct.
To add to that, through the chair, so that is in terms of what is already in the system, in the work order system. So that's not in terms of any deficiencies that may not have been identified and put into work orders.
Got it. And I just guess for management, those would be over the 4 districts. They're divided into 4 districts, but you've presented by 4 districts. Why is the East Division not there for the work orders on slide number 11?
Through the chair, the East District does not use SAP in terms of creating work orders.
What did they
Management,
use?
if you want to, it's mostly manual, I believe.
So little cards or something in 2024? Index cards?
Through the chair, the East District used a manual process. They entered the information into the work order system after the fact. They have since been brought into the fold, and they are entering the same as the other 3 districts.
But you must have information on their work orders since they did that, and it's not in here, so. can
We
get
do.
that?
The number of work orders that was reviewed by the Auditor General's office
Not on
is
the
included.
chart, so where can we get that to, obviously, if they're now done, is that not available? That's just a very simple question. Available, not available? East District, yes, no? Okay, I'll let you find that out, because I only have 5 minutes.
I'll have to get back to you on that, yeah.
So that's, yeah. I guess just this is management, who's doing their job and who's not doing their job. Whether you're signing off or not, that is a management issue over 4 different districts. So that's what I think. And if people aren't, if there's a lot of problems, then let's understand where they are. In the West District, it appears that not critical, low priority or no priority, 35%. And the others, low priority, no priority, hardly any. I can't read the red, but only 14 or 127 compared to 1,154. Would you not have done that already or know that you have a problem in the West District with repairs?
Last question.
No, I'm not done yet, so I have to have a second. Thank you.
To the chair, so we've identified that inconsistent practices and how the work orders are prioritized are part of the problem, so establishing more consistent practices. And we've had staff go out and verify in some of these districts where the open work orders, first of all, to make sure that any high priority ones are completed, and then to make sure that we're putting in place consistent practices in terms of how they're being tracked, monitored, and closed in each of the districts.
Thanks. I'd like a few more questions if I have a chance, please, Chair.
We will certainly look at a second round, but I'll give the others a chance. Are there other questions from the other members? Okay, I saw Councillor Meyer's hand first, then Councillor Nunziata.
Thank you, through you, Chair. So I guess my first question, just to confirm, your department also looks over the recreation centers, correct?
Technical services doesn't support the recreation centers except within the North District.
Okay. So I guess I'm just reading the report and I'm just going back from what we learned in phase 1. I'm really curious to know what has actually been done to start implementing the culture change that the audit committee asked you to start developing, as this seems to be a much deeper problem in the organization.
To the chair, a number of things have already happened in terms of listening sessions and meetings with all management staff, supervisors that have responsibility to oversee the quality of the work that's going on in the field. We've sat down with Local 416 to talk about tools, training, supports, but also expectations that we have for the frontline staff conducting that work. We are, undertaking a further frontline listening sessions that are scheduled in March to talk about the same things. I'm attending those, Donna's attending those, as is management. We're making sure that staff across the organization understand the findings of the audit, the seriousness of them, and public expectation. And performance management expectations are being implemented with all staff in 2025, particularly management staff, to ensure that they're going to be measured against their success at implementing the findings and sustaining a quality approach to their work.
Thank you. And I guess the supervisors that are in charge of the maintenance and repair, they're also the supervisors that are in charge of the day-to-day operations, correct?
Supervisors are not necessarily in charge of the day-to-day operations, given the number of parks that they have and the geographic responsibilities. We do have two different groups. They're two, and this is not the parks operation group that we talked about in phase 1. So there's supervisors certainly in the technical services group that would have oversight responsibility for the work and scope of the phase 2 audit, just like there's supervisors and responsible for the parks operations group that were the scope of the phase 1 audit.
So you have two separate groups of supervisors, but the same issues are occurring, being found in both audits in terms of not following up, incomplete work, inadequate record keeping, etc.
Well, maybe
I would say that there's trends that we're seeing in terms of administrative processes that in this particular audit are, I think, different than what we were seeing in the first audit in terms of backlog of open work orders, primarily because of the manual effort required to go back into the yard and fill out the paperwork that's required. Not necessarily that the work wasn't getting done, but just some of the administrative processes associated with the work weren't being done, making it difficult to sort of track and monitor progress. And the other key finding on this report, I think, is just the modernization of the systems that we require to more effectively manage the type of work this group is responsible for and the way in which the public can share that information. So that those are foundational changes that we need to make, I think, to really drive a more efficient outcome with technical services.
Sorry, I think your colleague was going to say something. Your colleague beside you was going to say something?
No, I think we're okay, Councillor Myers. Did you have further questions?
I just had when can we start seeing a concrete plan for the culture change program in terms of what concrete steps you plan on addressing this issue?
To the chair, I think I answered that question previously, that work is underway in culture change.
When can we see the plan? The full rolled out plan as to what you expect to do, what are the steps you're taking, and when you expect to reach your indications of success?
So we are scheduled to report back from the phase 1 audit, I believe, in July. So certainly we'll speak to that from the phase 1 audit, and depending on direction that we get today, we're hoping there's an opportunity to perhaps combine some of these report backs. We're looking at this as a holistic approach to parks, especially when we're talking about culture change. And so we're certainly happy to share the progress that we're making, what the plan is when we report back to Audit Committee.
Thank you.
Councillor Nunziata had the next question, but before we do that, just a little bit of housekeeping. I know there's a couple of members under a time constraint. I'm therefore going to propose a motion that we complete the agenda. That means we'll have to push through lunch, but I'm confident that we can get this done. So with that, I'll put that to the committee. Mr. Clerk, that's on the screen, that we complete the agenda. All those in favor? Any opposed? That carries.
Because I have to leave at 2, Councillor Fletcher.
Councillor Nunziata.
During lunch in, Councillor?
Birthday. So I have to do some
Cake then.
Okay. Just a couple quick questions. If you could explain, so A priority complaint, like a priority complaint, that would be where it's a safety issue, correct? Like if a slide, the paint is kind of scratched, that would not be a priority. That's just a matter of painting it and, correct?
Correct. The prioritization is around health and safety as being those things that we would
So it would
want to
be,
take care of
yeah,
first.
so some of these photographs in the report, it's just a matter of scratching on a slide or things like that. That's,
Yeah, I mean, and we understand from the public's perspective that the appearance and condition of the park amenities are important to their experience. From a prioritization of urgency work, we would obviously want to prioritize anything that could be a safety issue.
okay, now, how many complaints come in? Do you know the percentage of complaints that come in from 311?
To the chair, and certainly open it up to my colleagues in CXD, we don't know how many are complaints per se. We know, but maybe I'd turn it over to my colleague.
But
So, Mr. Chair,
Yes.
sorry, Mr. Chair, so we understand call volumes coming in from 311 in two categories. One is general inquiries, and the second is calls that come in through 311 that would be transferred to parks for action. From a complaints perspective, any complaints that are coming in for parks would be referred to parks through the general manager's office.
okay, so just one question, because I'm not going to speak for 5. When the complaint comes into 311, when they get a complaint from a resident, is it clear from the complaint from the resident exactly what the complaint is? Or, you know, and so they know in detail what it is? Or they just say, well, you know, this park's dirty or whatever? Like, how do the complaints come in?
So, Mr. Chair, so there's different channels that complaints can come in. They can come in directly to the parks team through the park supervisor. If they come in through 311, it could be a general inquiry related to parks or recreation. And then there are cases where we receive a call about a specific issue in a specific park, in which case 311 would warm transfer that call to the park supervisor or the customer.
To the chair, we have an email address that they can also send, the public can send it in direct. Yeah.
Thank you. So there are various different channels that complaints or requests for service can come in.
Yeah, because sometimes when a resident calls in for a complaint, they're not very clear exactly what they're calling about, right? Because I know when they call my office, oh, this park, okay, where is it? Well, I don't know, somewhere, you know, like they're not clear. And so it'd be difficult for the inspection if you don't get the proper information. That's the reason I asked that question. But in the report, if you can explain a work order created, work was directed to a contractor within 100 days of inspection. Can you explain the 100 days? What does that mean?
Perhaps I'll start off. So through the chair, we used 100 days as a reasonable period of time to consider that the work order was created promptly. So keeping in mind the timing for seasonality.
100 days, would it not just refer if it's capital or, you know, like can't be repaired? I mean, it's going to take sometimes months to repair, right? Is that why the 100 days is in there?
Through the chair, this is just for the creation of the work order. So from the time that a repair need is identified to it getting created in SAP, we used 100 days to allow for a reasonable amount of time because there is no policy on how quickly those work orders have to be created once the repair need is identified. So it doesn't count the time from once it's created, how long it actually takes to complete. This is just getting within 100 days into the system.
Okay, thank you for that. So my last question is, I don't know if the question was asked earlier, but in community centers, for example, if the shower's not working, the pool, or, you know, the dress, so that is, you send that to, and you have to hire a contractor to do that, and sometimes it takes months, right, to repair.
To the chair,
Right.
so it depends on which district of the city, but primarily it's a similar process. Staff in the facility would identify a deficiency. They would submit a work order request. Most of those types of services are provided by us through corporate real estate. And then corporate real estate would assign the work and repair it. In certain instances, and in the North District in particular, the technical services group have that function and they perform it. Community recreation doesn't have the facility technical skills within that operation to fix those things themselves.
Yeah, so just one last question, that's it. So when you get when I get a complaint from a resident saying, oh, the York Community Center, it's been months and they haven't fixed it. So it's the corporate real estate that's responsible.
Primarily
So
for...
the complaint shouldn't come to you.
No, the complaint, well, we're the
I know,
face,
but-
we're the face of the issue, and we want to be able to provide the public with a status update of what's happening. Some of these projects end up being capital, they're not necessarily corporate real estate, so it's complicated, but first is to figure out who has responsibility to repair it based on the issue and the scale of the issue. Then it's about the timelines, and then it's about communicating it, which, Recreation has a service disruption notification protocol that is to inform the public as to the status. Integrating with 311 is going to be the next piece that Recreation will be the third group to get online with 311.
Okay, that's it for all my questions.
Thank you. Other members of the committee with questions? Seeing none, we'll go to a second round. Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you, and I won't be long, but I have included this, I've asked to have this included in the CMP, so it will be tracked. And it is the volume of 311 calls that came in since 2021 to 2024, over 3 years. And it's just, it's head scratching how it all works. But when I'm looking at, and I'm wondering how you call this up. I'm asking management how you then look at patterns. There's one, like you're getting one call about the disposal of sanitary sewage from a recreational vehicle. However, there are a whole bunch of calls, like here, rinks and skating rinks. Maybe that's just for a schedule. There's park encampments, all in 3 different places. Report a concern with the maintenance of a park facility or feature. 12,000 came in. Park washrooms, 564. Ferries, 962. These are all here. Facilities, assets, maintenance, injuries, playgrounds, 2,000. Parks, location, facilities, 2,500. So they're not grouped at 311. How do you take these? How do you group them? How do you watch for patterns? And how do you tell your staff we have problems? And how do you collect them? Because I don't think you ever see these. These are seen at the local level. So this is a system that simply is, nobody can understand.
To the chair.
So tell me how you use this currently.
To the chair,
Do you?
we don't.
You don't use it?
That is why we're working on the transformation in the integration of 311 is to tag these
No, but
items so that
they're
we
here. You don't need 311. This is all you've got. How do you use this currently to know where the most complaints are about the most number of things in parks, to look for patterns? It's all about patterns, whether you have 311 or you don't.
To the chair, I think the point that we've tried to make is the current process doesn't provide us the type of information that we need to establish those patterns, because we don't know, for example, if it's an inquiry about a schedule or it's a complaint about a deficiency.
So let me just ask 311. So I call and I say, I need to know the rink schedule. You say, okay, I'm sending you, what happens then?
So, Mr. Chair, the 311 operator would tag that to a knowledge base entry, which would generate the data set that you're looking at in front of you.
Yes, but how would that get sent over? How would the person know the rink schedule? Sent to whom?
So,
Just say, sorry, we don't have any interface with the Parks Department. I can't tell you the rink
no,
schedule.
we would, in those cases, we would warm transfer the caller to the parks department, the park supervisor,
You'd say it to which park supervisor for rinks?
to the appropriate park supervisor tagged in the knowledge base.
And then that park supervisor would do what? Write that down? I've got calls, I've got this, just to the park what level of supervisor is that at? District, local? Which supervisor gets that?
To the chair, it's at the local level.
Local, so a 311, when you're warm transferring, you don't warm transfer with the CC to a management person. I just need to have that right. Like, this is the system that we've used since 2009. You don't warm transfer anywhere but directly to that person. So, right?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, can you please repeat, Councillor?
Your warm transfer is directly to somebody who's going to operationalize that. Your warm transfer doesn't also go to somebody who manages that section, so they know that there's now 2,000 complaints. Only 311 would know how many complaints came in, not their nature. So there's no interface. That's all it does. Go fix it. Here's some information. That's it. That's your system.
So the 311 operator would refer the call to a supervisor at the park on the basis of what the caller is describing.
I understand. My question is, they would not tag anybody in upper management that these calls were all coming in.
You're all right, that is correct. They do
That's your
not.
system currently. Nobody in upper management has any idea about any calls that are coming in through your 311, correct?
I don't think there's a systemic way today for upper management to have full visibility. I think the best sources of information is the report in front of you, Councillor, and the work order management system in use in some of the districts.
So you use a phone call, not an email?
That is correct, unless the inquiry comes in by way of an email.
Correct. Okay. Quite a system we have here, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. I would like to ask some follow-up questions on that to make sure I understand. So I'm going to reset my time. I'm going to exercise the second round. You sure can. I want to make sure I understand what I'm looking at. Councillor Fletcher provided some submissions, and she spoke to them. They are charts for the benefit of those listening online. You know, they are a listing of a whole bunch of categories of inquiries or complaints, and then some stats in terms of how many came in. Do I understand it correctly that because parks is not, except for forestry, but not anymore, parks is not integrated with this 311 service request system, in that if somebody calls 311, they make a request regarding parks, and the only thing the call taker can do is either dictate what's in the knowledge base, which is fair, or they transfer them over to the appropriate contact. But 311 does not then create a service request ticket to track it.
You are correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so how do we go from the system that we have now to the system that we dream about, which is congruent with many of the other departments, where 311 takes at least the front-end ownership of a citizen's request or an inquiry?
Good question, Mr. Chair. So that is exactly the work we've done with the other integrated service divisions like Toronto Water, Transportation Services, right? So that the ability to do what you just described is enabled by a couple of different technology tools, Salesforce and EWMS or Maximo. So that is what we have a plan to accelerate through the course of this year and implement in parks operations. I will caution, however, that technology doesn't fix the issue. It enables the ability to do what you described. There's a lot of process work and a lot of people work to be done as we implement the technology. We're talking about putting this technology in the hands of 800 staff, right? So this is a big change from what staff are used to doing in terms of running their business.
What they're used to doing in terms of running their business is taking a call, And depending on, and do I get this right, depending on the individual, tracking it or not tracking it, and in my experience, it's get the job done, right? Like that's the focus, which is not a bad thing. But beyond that, do we have any scraps of paper, bits of paperwork that help us put together the pieces to understand the nature of the business? And all of the calls that have come in over time and all of the types of requests and the patterns that Councillor Fletcher have talked about.
To the chair, I mean, I would say that we have, through the audit report itself, you know, some trends, some information where, you know, the helpful, you know, aspect of the audit is it gives management a sense of where the priorities are from an improvement and process change perspective, that we are matching up against the technology that's available, and to Mr. Jollimore's point, the change management work that we need to do to successfully adopt it.
Now, beyond the 311 system is the back end, the work order management system. And that too is put into motion, and that too is a significant scale change, right? Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. So as I mentioned, there's two tools in use to enable what you described in closing the loop. That is the CRM system, or Salesforce, and the work order management system, EWMS, Maximo.
So back to Councillor Fletcher's list, I'll pick anything here. Bees, hornet, wasp nest in a city park or recreation facility. I get it. Somebody sees a bee's nest, calls in, says, hey, 311, you got to know about this. And so and it says 159. So in this period, we know that there was 159 calls, but we don't know anything about what was done beyond that.
That is correct.
Okay. I guess the only fallback is the counselor's office gets a call if it's not taken away. So I don't get a lot of those calls.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. Sorry, just to add. So that is correct from a 311 perspective, which is the front end of the process. It could be that in the work order management systems in use in parks, there could be information.
Fair enough. So in parks, if I understand this right, maybe you've got a paper trail because you might have called a pest control company to get rid of that. But you can't go click, click, click on the computer and tell me. It would probably require some work, or probably more efficiently calling the supervisor and saying, do you remember the bee's nest? What happened to it?
That's correct.
Okay. Okay, so I guess the wrap-up question is, that's a journey, and I'm sorry I'm over time. That's why I'm getting the nod. It's a journey to get to the end state. What can we do in between to get better at it?
To the chair, our management response identifies the interim strategies that we're taking, you know, while waiting for the technology. But to Mr. Jollimore's point, this is people-based as well. So the training, the tools, the guidelines, you know, more robust manual processes that we're going to have to maintain while we wait for the more digital solutions to come in are the requirement, and we've already started that work.
Thank you very much. Councillor Fletcher, did you have additional questions or to speak? Okay.
When that call comes in and says there's a bee in whatever park, the bee's nest in whatever park you have, and that gets transferred by 311 to the park supervisor to eliminate that, I'm looking at you both. Is there a problem with that 311 operator not sending that to Ms. Kavakis by email? Call about something such and such, call about something such and such, call about something such and such. And then somebody there is just tracking, because there's no other way to track. Management has no way to track anything.
Yeah, I would say the answer would be the same whether it's tracked by 311 or by parks staff, as it would be a purely manual process.
No, it's not my question. I'm talking about patterns. So if there are 2,000 calls about broken things in parks, and they're only going to the supervisor, the parks director has no idea those calls are coming in, correct? At this point.
So that is correct, but I think there's two pieces of data that could be used. I think the one piece of data is the data sitting in front of you, Councillor, in terms of those calls received by 311 and tagged to a knowledge base or an issue. That can certainly be shared with the Parks management staff. I think in addition to that, the pulling reports from the work order management system in use in parks would be, in my view, the best source of information.
Correct, whether they're not all done, but this is a high-level view, so you could call these up. There's nothing stopping you with calling these up. Do you call these reports up to know what the patterns and
To the
trends are?
chair, we can call this up, and
you don't.
we'd have to sort of dig into the details, as I mentioned before. We wouldn't know what the nature of the inquiry is.
Yes, but you'd know that there's trends here, thousands of calls about something. Now you know there's issues out there.
Correct. We would know what's standing up stronger on, you know, whether it's broken, whether it's bees or something else.
3,800 calls about outdoor skating rinks and arenas compared to location schedules, notice disclosures. So that's a lot.
Right.
What does that mean? But you have no way to track it, go back, except if there's some other kind of interface. And when is this 311 system? You're only doing a pilot now. How many years before this system's intact with 311?
So,
Years.
so Mr. Chair, so our intent is to accelerate the work with the Parks Operations Group and implement it through the course of this year. And just a reminder that we've been in the middle of implementing, closing the loop with the other 5 integrated service divisions over the last number of years.
So every single person calling here, that would be now on 311. So I could call that up in my office. You're not taking years to do it. It's 1 year.
So our intent is to deploy the technology through the course of this year.
For every single call, not just for a sector pilot.
So it's for the Parks Operations branch specifically.
And then maybe the Auditor General can come back and tell us in a year how that's going.
Okay, any further questions from the committee? Seeing none, members wishing to speak. Councillor Fletcher.
Yes, I would. I don't have a motion, but I would ask the Auditor General, since she's got this, that tracking that and 311 application is probably the most important thing. I will just have to say that 2009, 311 was put together. It's now 2025. That's a lot of years, and only urban forestry was able to go into 311. In my experience, there's 2 places that citizens and residents have the most interest in. It's roads and parks that they interface with every day. And then there's spikes on different things. You know, if there's 15 dead raccoons, then that's happening every once in a while. It's not constant. So this division, that is probably where so many people go, 1,500 parks, spend so much time and watch very carefully and feel so much like that's their front yard and they want it to be great. For this many years, nothing's been done to put that into 311. And I'm going to call that just a colossal management fail, Mr. Chair, because it is. The good news is 90% of all those work orders that are out there have been completed. Even though they're not signed off, they've been completed. So the emphasis is on doing the work, not signing the paper. That's the good news. If it was not doing the work and not signing the paper, I think we'd have a different situation here. And in this, I just think it's over again. I want to know what happened in the West End. How come 35% thought they were low or no priority? That's very odd to me. What happened there? I'd like to know that by council. I'm going to ask that very question. The East District, yeah, so they're doing something on paper. Somebody's got to be able to say what they were. These are a lot of work orders, 6,000, 7,000 work orders in North and South District that were acted on, and we know what some of those things are. I'm really concerned that this wasn't seen as a pattern. I'm always looking for patterns, just as the Auditor General, that's her job. Where's the patterns, what happened? It's just so clear that there's things on this list that are really critical to know. You may have a problem in a certain area. If 4,000 people are getting in touch with 311 about rinks and arenas, What does that mean? What's underlying there? When there's at least how many thousand, so many people calling in about encampments and homelessness, you can't do something about that, but I'm sure that Mr. Tanner needs to know that, what that volume is and where those are. So I guess I'm just really disappointed that these big pattern places just haven't really been looked at. In High Park, 982 calls about High Park. That's a lot. There's no other park that's identified in that way. What were they? Was it the movement strategy? Was it something else? Yeah, but was that what it is or not? So, you know, how's that response? How does it get factored into things that we're doing here in the city about all of everything? So the ones that are, you know, 3 about the steps in a park compared to the thousands of calls that are coming in on different things. The playground equipment, 2,800 calls. Maintenance, 12,000. We know that's what it is, but that's where we should be able to drill down. That's where you should be able to drill down. There should be some other kind of system where our manager, we have a parks director who knows nothing about these central issues. And usually when you don't have that direct digital interface, there's some other way of figuring out where your hotspots are. Your hotspots. We look for hotspots all the time. They're here. How are they managed? So I'm happy that we're able to have this pulled from 311. I want to know about the West District and the East District because you've pulled that together. Somebody should have known about that. And I just think that 2009, the system we have is from 1909, not from 2009 at the moment. And the culture change, I don't want the culture change to be from wanting to fix things. I think the majority of folks that work in our parks are people that love working there. They like to see what it looks like. They like to make sure kids are playing safely. They feel strongly. They like their work. And technical services, you're a tradesperson. You want to make sure that you're doing things well and it looks good. So I'm looking forward to hearing how many jobs were contracted out or lost, taken away. And I'm expecting to know that by council. So I'm just flagging that, Mr. Chair. A couple of things that I'd like brought forward before council or at council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. Further comments from the committee? I will speak very briefly. Councillor Nunziata, go ahead.
Yeah, I just make some comments and thank you to Parks and you know, and I get a lot of calls in my office directly. So I get them directly and I forward them on to the supervisor. 311, I've always said I've always had a problem with 311. I've never been happy with 311. I've never supported 311. And so I've always had, no, from when we started, I didn't vote for it. But, you know, I get a lot of calls from residents. They call 311, nothing's been done, this and that, you know, so they deal directly through me and I go through Parks. And, you know, when there's a lot of issues in the park and you know, with the supervisor, we go directly to the supervisor and we're able to get back to the constituent and see, well, we've cleaned it up. This has been resolved. So they're happy. So, you know, you do get a lot of complaints in parks and, you know, Councillor Fletcher, right, the encampments, they come through my office, we send them to parks send them to housing, and it takes months and months before it's even addressed. And that's not the fault of the parks, we have to get them out of the encampments. And housing, you know, we're waiting for housing to go out and get them and put them in housing, and that takes months. And it's frustrating because they call 311, nothing's being done, and, you know, it's a long process. But I will move the recommendations that we have in the report. And I think the parks, I think you're moving forward and, you know, with phase 2, and you've agreed with all the recommendations, and so thank you for that, and thank you to the auditor.
Thank you, Councillor Nunziata. I'll speak briefly. I too want to express my thanks. You know, I'm really proud of the parks in Etobicoke. I mean, those are all over the city, but Etobicoke are the ones that I use. And, you know, I think that is a theme that is prevalent in our community. They're important spaces. And members of council know this because we get a lot of calls about them. sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not good, but it means people are paying attention. And I would say that a very significant volume of the type of conversations that I have with people are related to parks. And I think that's why you see so much interest at the committee today from members of council, because we just want the best. And there's a lot of people that work hard to try to deliver the best. I think part of the story here is about documenting things. We don't want to bury people in paperwork, but there is some necessary to make sure that we're recognizing work. And most importantly is that we have the opportunity to see patterns, whether they exist and they're sort of dogging us, or whether they're emergent. And that allows us to be nimble as an organization to continue to address needs. And I think there's a gap here that needs to be filled, and make sure that the work carries on. So with that, I'm going to ask staff for an undertaking if they'll agree to it. In the previous Parks report, we asked you to come back with a couple of reports. One was done in December, there'll be one in July, and there'll be one in November. And those reports were about the implementation of the daily activity sheets. But also Councillor Myers, I think, moved an amendment that talked about a culture change as being part of that. And I wondered if staff would take it as an undertaking to include a little bit about this audit in those reports, just in terms of how we are doing and how there's a lot of overlap with questions about the implementation of a 311 system and a work order system. And because I think the committee would probably like to talk about it again in the future. So I won't move a motion to that effect, but if there's a nod, I think yes, that there's an opportunity to include a few words in those reports. I think that would be an efficient way to come back to this committee and let us know how it's going. Other than that, I appreciate everyone's work on this, including in Parks and of course the Auditor General's office in this committee. So just make sure there's no one else here. Councillor Crisanti, did you want to speak?
Just a couple of quick words, and I got quite inspired about some of the things that everyone has said too, and I'm going to echo a couple of your comments as well, Chair. Up in Etobicoke North, I have a community that is so engaged and so much love their parks. Our parks all over Etobicoke North are used to the fullest. People love it, and I could tell you our relationship with parks and staff is a great relationship. Things get done in a timely manner. When I have seniors and people who ask, can we get an extra bench? Can we get an extra garbage facility or whatever? That's the response to that is quick, and we always look after the needs of our community. I know this is challenging. I know too that we have a lot of parks across the city, over 1,500 citywide, and it's a big, massive job. Now, incorporating all of that into 311, look, I guess we already have 311 in place, and I guess that's a good idea, to make sure that happens. And why it hasn't happened, we don't, we're not clear on that. It should have already happened, and should be an integral part of what's going on when people call and have issues with parks. But up here in Etobicoke North, my office likely takes the vast majority of those calls. I don't think anybody calls 311. They call us first, and we get everything looked after for them, and we get it looked after in a very timely manner. So I want to thank Parks for all their great work that they do, and thank you, Chair, and that's all I wanted to say.
Thanks, Councillor Crisanti. So we'll have those motions, Mr. Clerk. Excuse me, not the motions, but the recommendations. All those in favor on the staff recommendations? Any opposed? That carries. Excuse me. Our next item is AU 8.6, City of Toronto's Modular Housing Initiative, the need to balance fast delivery with stronger management of contracts and costs, management status update on recommendations. Councillor Fletcher, you held that?
I did. I just had one little question as far as what the fast delivery, are they, obviously the fast delivery, is it fast enough?
Could you repeat it? I think this one is a hard time.
Oh, just on the fast delivery, is it fast enough? What are the constraints around being fast? What are the constraints around management contracts for you?
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Chair, yeah,
Did you
I
hear?
think
I'm
I got
sorry.
most of
I
that.
didn't have my mic in the right place.
But if I didn't, perhaps you can follow up. So I think what I heard was.
Oh, I could do it again.
Sure.
The Chair just told me I didn't have my mic, so you could hear me, and thank you, Chair. What is fast delivery? What are the constraints to fast delivery? And what are your constraints to currently managing the contracts and the costs?
Thank you, Chair. What I'll do is I'll speak to the timing constraints, and then I'll ask some of my CREM colleagues to speak to the contracting constraints. So broadly speaking, in terms of timing, we aim to go as fast as possible, and one of the mechanisms to do that is around the rezoning. So the planning approvals, development approvals, and building approvals has been critical to our ability to move forward. So we have done a variety of things there. We've used both ministerial zoning order requests, and we've also had the city do our own kind of rezoning approvals. We've initiated those, and that has resulted in us being able to move much faster than regular, even affordable housing projects that are also prioritized. So we have very fast approvals for modular and rapid housing. And maybe I'll pause there and ask my colleague to speak to the contracting arrangements and what we've been able to do to improve speed there.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Fletcher. So in terms of being able to expedite the actual construction, we've looked at different methodologies of delivery. We're using now, we've used design build for the most part as part of the Rapid Housing Initiative. But moving forward, we're implementing and using a construction management approach, which allows us to accelerate or phase the project and work as a partner with the contractor versus a design bid build, which means that you have to finish the design, then go to market and get a price. Working in a construction management approach allows you to onboard a constructor and a designer at the same time and work, towards value engineering, constructability reviews, and then actually phase the construction of the project.
How much faster does that allow you to go? Design build.
My apologies, Councillor, I couldn't hear the question.
Well, how much faster does that allow you to proceed? How many months does it shave off?
Subject to any site conditions, it could save about 4 to 6 months.
4 to 6 months, so half a year. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Auditor, that's your recommendation, is to tighten that up, design build, get in there, get somebody doing it, get out there, get it up, outside of the constraints of community that doesn't want it or provincial government that won't support it, which are constraints that we don't control here.
So through the chair, our report was really more about tightening up in terms of management of contracts and costs. And so this was just an update in terms of implementation of those recommendations.
But we do understand that if there's not a zoning or the province isn't allowing it to go, that's a time constraint, correct?
Right.
Or if the community is up in arms and it's becoming difficult to do, that's also a time constraint. So those are constraints outside of our control. These are constraints inside of our control. Do you think it's always useful to make sure everybody knows that there's constraints outside of our control?
Through the chair, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, anyone wish to speak? Councillor Fletcher, did you want to move the recommendation?
No, I'm moving the recommendation. I'm happy to hear of the new design build because that will move things very quickly. And the whole idea is to get people into, as we learned earlier, there's nothing more effective than having somebody have a permanent roof over their head. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fletcher moves the recommendations. All those in favor? Any opposed? That carries. Okay, on to AU 8.7, which is the City of Toronto Audit Planning Report for the year ended December 31st, 2024. I'm welcoming Mr. Travers and Ms. Kushnut. Welcome back to our committee. I believe that you have a brief presentation for the committee, and I invite you to start that as soon as you're ready.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. We are here in connection with the audit planning report for the external audit, City of Toronto's financial statements for the year ended December 31st, 2024. This is the first of two formal communications that we have with this group. The second, of course, will be once we've completed the audit and we're back for you to apprise you of the results of the audit itself. The audit plan deck goes into a great deal of detail with respect to our planned approach, areas of audit focus, materiality, any changes in terms of audit or accounting standard to be implemented in the current period. I won't spend a lot of time going through the detail right now. We'll take it as being read, but Maria and I are here today to respond to any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? I'll ask one very brief one, and that is, I know that the management letters have been an item of interest to the committee. You can't predict what will come up out of this audit, but if you could just briefly tell me the system at which you deliver that information to the committee and subsequently to the city for their consideration.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. The process is we complete our audit work with the objective of providing an opinion on your financial statements. Through the process of performing that work, if we become aware of items for which there are opportunities for improvement or strengthening your control environment, bring those first to management to ensure that our observations are appropriate. Management then will develop a response to our observations. They will come forward as part of our product. Typically, it would be great if we had them when we present our findings of the audit, but sometimes it may be the audit committee that follows, depending on the period of vetting the observations as well as coming up with a planned action. At that point in time, they become the property of the city in terms of reporting back on their progress in terms of responding to those items. However, in carrying out our annual audit work itself, if we observe the same items that we've observed in prior years, we'll note that.
Thank you. And so sometimes there is a gap between your audit findings with what you file to the committee and what follows in the management letter, but nonetheless, it finds its way to us either way.
Yes, that's correct.
Great, thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, anyone wish to speak? Thank you for your work. Good luck in the year ahead. And with that, I'll move the recommendations I believe that's from the CFO's recommendations for disposition on this. The controller's recommendations. All those in favor? Any opposed? That carries.
Have one more, right?
Okay, we are now on AU 8.8, which is Arenas 2023 audited financial statements and status of outstanding 2023 audited financial statements. Councillor Fletcher, you had held that item.
I just have a few questions of staff on that. And these are the arenas that are not directly operated, correct? These are arena boards.
I'm going to pause. Do we have someone here to answer the questions?
Sorry, do you want to? Yeah, these are for the 8 arena boards that are operated through a board of management.
These are the board of management boards, and these are coming in for 2023. So it's a little, we're noticing that's a tiny bit behind.
So through the chair, it has been a process in terms of catching up post-COVID, and so there are 3 left. 2 of them are from delays on their 22 statements, and they are close to being completed, and then the last one has a prior period adjustment, so.
Yes.
So there's progress being made, although they have been delayed.
They're a little late, but they're arena boards, so they're local boards of management that have the councillor on them. And I guess I'll just ask Ms. Basil that we do have AOCs that have a board of management, but there's somebody directly from the city that works with them that says, hey, where's that coming in? Here's the requirements that make it a little easier for them to meet all their requirements as a board of management. I don't think we have anything like that for arena boards, do we? That central clearinghouse for them with somebody on staff that's right there to answer their questions, help them out, do all those kinds of things.
To the chair, that's correct. It's not quite as structured and coordinated in the same way that the AOCS model is.
Do you think it would be helpful to have that as a resource for, it is a resource for the AOCs, a resource for the boards of management, because we've had some conversation about the boards of management and how they're operating, and they'd be one at a time. This might be very helpful if you were able to put something together that offered that resource and that's option for better structure and reporting.
To the chair, yes, we agree, and that's work that we will undertake to look at where there, while there has been progress made, we realize there's more to do and improvements we can make. So we are undertaking that work, looking at the AOC model.
And to make sure we're not talking anyway about taking over the boards of management, because I see from their financial statements, we don't get management for each of the city arenas, but we did get the report from Mr. Dayton that showed the difference between a directly operated costing for one arena and a board of management. And it was more flexible and a little cheaper at the board of management arena with more programs, more array of programs, I'll say, and free programs, right?
That's right. It's looking at what we can do internally as staff in terms of enhancing support, not making a change in terms of how things are structured or overall governance.
Great. So those are my questions, and I'm fine with that, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Fletcher. Any other questions of staff? Anyone wishing to speak?
I'll just follow up to that, and noticing that I know BIAs, for my BIAs that are having their AGMs, our staff in the BIA office has to say, okay, it's May, and you're supposed to have had your financial statement in December and approved by your board. So it looks like, and I'm not picking on any of these arenas, it just seems to be a bit slower. And I do think that it's just the structure, that they don't have that resource assistance, that they know, here's your deadlines, here's this, how can we help? Can we get somebody from finance to help you? Can we do this? What's available? And I think that, as Ms. Basil says, that would be helpful for all these arenas. But I want to be very clear, it's not about turning them all over to be city-run arenas. The same as we wouldn't say, take your AOCs and actually run them as city community centers. They're quite different in how they operate. The staffing seems to be very stable throughout a number of years. The programs at these arenas, and I know you have one, Councillor Nunziata, that it's stable, you expect what's happening, you know the people, there's not a big turnover and change. And I'd say that some of the programs can be very much tailored locally. So without making a motion, I think I'm just going to ask the city manager in his office to expedite that kind of assistance to all 8 arena boards that we're currently offering to the other types of local boards of management, which include AOCs and actually BIAs. They have a lot more help than we're able to give here. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Fletcher, are you comfortable to move that these be advanced?
Yes, I'll move it. Yes, happy to move it. Sorry.
Anyone else wishing to speak? Seeing none. On the recommendations in the item, all those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Okay, we have to go back up to the top of the agenda. Members, I'll remind you that we had set down item AU 8.1, Auditor General's 2024 Annual Report, demonstrating the value of the Auditor General's office. Councillor Fletcher, we'll go back to you. You had some questions that were very specific.
Yeah, I know. Just, I think I can expedite it. I think I can expedite it.
Okay, go ahead.
By speaking with my motion.
Okay, so are there any other questions I'll just check with the members? Nope. No. Councillor Fletcher to speak.
Thank you. And this is, thank you, the Auditor General, for showing your work plan and demonstrating the value of your office. Part of the value around Airbnb is making sure that locations that might be being used in that way, not in compliance, are available for housing. I spoke about that earlier when we were talking about the shelter, your shelter report, that everything we can do to free up housing. And so I just want to be clear in that there are certain addresses that appear to be what people commonly call ghost hotels. And ghost hotels are places that are buildings, condos, that actually are full of Airbnb rentals. And I understand that there may be a few of those on Dundas Street East, and I'd like to know if that was reviewed in your review, Madam Auditor, and if not, why not, or why MLS hasn't reviewed those or brought those forward, and what exactly is happening there. So this is just to start that process, because this is the time and place to do that. So that's my motion, Mr. Chair, and if I make that and we can do that, then this meeting could end pretty quickly. And it's not in camera, apparently. We've checked.
It's not. No.
Were they reviewed? As part of this, simply those questions to be included, yes, those were part of my review when I reviewed the MLS, or they weren't part of my review. Simple. Yeah, it's in order.
Okay, anyone else wishing to speak on the item? Seeing none, on Councillor Fletcher's amendment. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. And on the item is amended. All those in favor? Any opposed? And that is carried. Mr. Clerk, I will check with you. Have we covered all items of business? I hear a yes, and therefore...
No, I just want to say, I think you should go to the hospital for your eye.
Thank you.
Oh, okay. Is that a motion? I'll second it.
Looks like it's very infectious.
Thank you.
Saw it yesterday.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you to everybody. The meeting is adjourned.
Francis.